before we invite the public in? All good to go? Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this meeting of the Licensing Committee. The meeting is live streamed, and if the meeting should go down, we will continue. We won't pause the meeting. Okay, over to the agenda. Patrick, have we got any apologies and substitutions?
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Lavinia Edwards and apologies from Councillor Charlotte Kane. Councillor Alan Sharp is subbing for Lavinia Edwards and Councillor Lorna Dupre is subbing for Councillor Charlotte Kane.
Thank you. Welcome to the committee, both of you. Do we have any declarations of interest? Christine?
I'm not sure if it's particularly relevant, but we're looking at all sorts of things here. My husband holds a drinks licence, for want of a better word, political at leisure.
I don't think I
I've
don't think that's prejudicial, Christine. Any other declarations of interest? No? Fine. And thank you very much. In that case, then, is everybody happy for me to sign the minutes of the meeting held on the 18th of June as a correct record? Perfect. I have no chair's announcements, in which case then we'll move on to agenda item number 5, which is the Licensing Act 2003, our revised Licensing Authority Statement of Licensing Policy. It's the 5-year revision. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. As you say, this is to determine the Council's statement of licensing policy under the Licensing Act 2003, which deals with alcohol, entertainment, late-night refreshment across the district. The background to this is a draft statement of licensing policy was presented to the Licensing Committee on the 18th of June 2025, and formal consultation took place between the 20th of June 2025 and the 1st of August 2025. All Licensing Act responsible authorities, licence holders, representative bodies of licence holders, also businesses and residents in the district, and it was also advertised in the council offices, on the website and at Ely Library. So it's quite an extensive consultation exercise that goes on with this particular item. During the consultation period, the Licensing Authority received 3 formal responses. The table on page 10 sets those out, and the full content can be found in Appendix 1. So if we look at Table 1 on say, page 10 of the report, you'll see that Cambridgeshire County Council's Director of Public Health put in a comment, and those comments are summarised in these various tables. So what you'll see in column 2, should I say, you have section that they were referring to in their comments. The change requested is in column 3, and then the recommendation from myself is in column 4. So there was an inclusion of a specific mention to underage sales, and my recommendation was that the draft shouldn't be changed, as underage sales are covered in the overall licensing objectives. Paragraph 1.15, a request for inclusion of specific wording. This licensing policy will support outcomes identified in the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Health and Wellbeing Integrated Care Strategy, etc. And I recommend no change to the wording here. The section keeps to headline areas rather than specific external documents, just in case external documents change. So the request as such is already there because the policy does mention health and well-being within it. So from that point of view, my recommendation is not to go with the change that was requested. Paragraph 6.6, inclusion of consideration of a proximity of drug and alcohol service premises. My recommendation is, again, no policy change, as public health is not a licensing objective at this time. It's just simply sits outside of licensing at this point in time. Paragraph 6.7, specific reference to binge drinking practices to promote responsible drinking practices. Again, my recommendation is no change to the policy, as there are mandatory conditions already on premise licenses that basically cover irresponsible promotions of drink. So, you know, the yard of ale type of things, and pound a pint and stuff like that is already catered for within the policy and in the mandatory conditions. Paragraph 7.6, specific reference to known association with illicit goods, including tobacco and alcohol. So this was sort of a reference to saying that if a property is known to have specific reference to dealing in illicit alcohol and tobacco, that should be specifically mentioned. And my recommendation, again, is no change to policy, as the wording in this particular section of 7.6 is intentionally wide to capture trading in all illicit products, not limiting it just to alcohol and tobacco. Moving down further, so East Cambridgeshire Community and Partnership Manager, paragraph 1.98, the manager asked for the wording to be reworded to the Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014 gives councils the authority to draft and implement PSPOs in response to particular issues affecting their communities. Provided certain criteria and legal tests are met, councils can use PSPOs to prohibit specified activities and or require certain things to be done by people engaged in particular activities within a defined public area. My recommendation is to replace the wording that was in the draft at 198 with those details that were requested by the manager, Mr. Beige. I think they are far, far better than the wording that's already there. Final licence holder for the Ely Sailing Club, paragraph 5.4, raised concerns regarding the impact of the new Terrorism Protection of Premises Act 2025 on small clubs. I've recommended, again, no change to the wording of 5.4. However, officers will provide information to all licence holders to reassure them once more detail is available. So this is a piece of legislation that at the moment, the legislation is passed, it's enacted, but it is yet to have all of the regulations and the secondary sort of, I suppose, the meat on the bones. To put that particular licence holder, you know, sort of at ease, the impact is proportionate to the scale of the operation. We do know that much. So smaller concerns will not be overly burdened with the requirements under this piece of legislation, but larger venues, obviously, which are where the public in larger numbers gather, they will have more of an impact. As I say, we do know that level of detail. So we will, like we always do, we will email out to all licence holders once we've got more detail and put their mind at ease on that. So, in conclusion, the input from those who responded is very much appreciated, and whilst it's acknowledged that the recommendations in Table 1 above do not support any of the items from the Director of Public Health, what they wish to see, it's important to state that these items raised by DPH are covered in the existing wording. The amendment requested by the Manager of Community and Partnerships will provide better clarity. The draft statement of licensing policy Appendix 2 has been amended to show this change to Section 198. Again, financial and legal implications, the cost incurred by the council convening this hearing, etc., is covered by the fees. There are no other financial implications from this decision. It has gone out to a very wide public consultation, and my recommendation in paragraph 2 is members consider the information as consulted upon and determine to approve the draft statement of licensing policy to include the suggested amendments at section 198 and tracked as changes in Appendix 2, and then to recommend them to full council for adoption, because this is a piece of work that has to be adopted by full council. And it will then come into effect on the 7th of January 2026 for a further period of 5 years. That's all I have to say on the matter.
Thank you, Stuart. Do we have any questions for Stuart? Christine, Gareth, Keith, in that order, because that's how I saw you. And Lorna, and John. Good Lord. Are you making a note? Start with Christine.
It's not so much a question as such, but on paragraph 1.17a, I would like to see the wording changed, because it says good relations between individuals with different. I would like to see that changed to all protected characteristics. I think that's more of an inclusive language than having different in there. Is that possible to do that?
So can you repeat that? Sorry, Christine, I was busy trying to find the piece.
It says here, East Cambridgeshire District Council is committed to eliminating discrimination, harassment and victimisation whilst advancing equality of of opportunity and fostering good relations between individuals with, it says different, I would like that to state all protected characteristics.
All.
All, yeah. Because it's, no, all.
Hang on, we've got the grammar
No,
police here.
No, all. It's more inclusive language, in my opinion.
Any comments, anybody? John?
Would
On Christine's point?
Yes,
Yeah.
on that point, I agree with this, but I don't think
Microphone, please, John.
I don't agree. I'm not sure if all is correct. It seems to imply that you have to have all these different characteristics. But any of the protected characteristics would be, I think, appropriate.
Coming back.
Yeah, if John will switch his microphone off.
I disagree, because all includes everybody. It's more inclusive language. Any can be misinterpreted.
Stuart?
Sorry, Chair, if I may. I completely agree. I think different should be moved and removed. I personally, trying to put it across from the point of view of saying that we're saying about people who have protected characteristics and those obviously who don't have protected characteristics. And if I was reading it with all in it, I would be seeing that it's to foster good relations between people with all of those protected characteristics. Yeah. Meaning that you have to have all of them, rather than saying that, with any of those protected characteristics. So you have a situation where you are differentiating between those who have any one of the multiple characteristics, and then obviously those who do not have any of those. I obviously bow to councillors on this,
yes.
But my opinion would
So
be,
are you recommending, Stuart, that we take different out?
I completely agree that word is not correct in this day and age, any...
With any protected... Of course you can, sweetheart. Do you want to pop your... Stuart, do you want to take it? Still not on, love. Still not on, Christine.
And in the next line it says, and those who do not have them, that actually covers that anyway.
I personally, think I'm agreeing with John on this one, that it would read better between individuals with any protected characteristics and those that do not have them. Does that cover?
Those do not have any, perhaps.
Maggie just remove different and it still reads okay.
Yeah, we could just remove different, as just been advised. Anybody else got any grammar thoughts on this? Lorna?
Thank you. I do actually have a badge at home that says grammarian on it. I just forgot to bring it with me this morning.
John normally pulls us up.
I think the issue, and we haven't pre-discussed this, but I think if I'm reading Councillor Whelan's comments correctly, she's wanting to see the word all included somewhere in there. Is it possible to delete different, which I agree is wrong, and put fostering good relations between all individuals with protected characteristics and with those who do not have them?
Hang on a second. So move individuals as well then?
No.
Oh.
But delete the word different.
Yes.
And then insert all between and individuals. So it says between all individuals with protected characteristics.
That works for me. Yes. I think that's well done, grammar. What's your badge say? What does your badge say at home?
My badge at home says grammarian.
Grammarian. Excellent. Right. I love that. I need to earn one. I haven't got that yet. But no, I think that reads much better. Do you agree, John? Everybody happy with that? Right, perfect. We can amend that then.
Gareth next.
Gareth, I believe you're next. And then Keith. And then John.
I was just going to ask about the sailing club. Did you specifically go back to them and tell them what you've just told us, that you're going to tell everybody about the less restrictive things for very small and private clubs?
Yes, Councillor. Yes, that is all in hand. That will all happen.
Keith.
Thank you, Chair. Just also touching on that point, Terrorism Protection of Premises Act 2025, otherwise known as Martin's Law, if I'm correct, is that right?
Yes, I believe it is. Yeah.
Okay, so obviously the Act dated 2025 is due to come into force soon. if not already. Do we know when it will actually come into force, and will it require a further revision of the policy, which, once we've approved this, doesn't actually come in until April next year for the next 5-year period?
Councillor, you are correct. The legislation has been enacted. There is still work ongoing with regards to the details about who's going to enforce things. So all about, as I say, the meat on the bones as such we don't yet have, which is why the wording in the policy is I suppose you'd say, suitably vague. It covers and says that they have a duty to consider these issues. I don't believe we would need to do another review of the policy, say in 6 months' time. However, if we do need to do that because it is deemed to not be sufficient, then we can do that. Even though we have a set time frame that it has to be reviewed within 5 years, there's this set rolling period. You can review it sooner, and many councils have done when things have come along. So it's not something you're setting today for 5 years and it can't be looked at. I hope that answers your question.
John, I think, next.
Oh, yeah, John. Sorry.
John?
Thank you. Thank you very much for this thing. It's very comprehensive. I have a few little questions, if I may say so. Page 19, I think at the top it's, is it 19? Oh no, sorry, page 21, sorry. Oh, 19, yeah, sorry, 19. Should we revise the 2018 estimate up to the current, to 2000 and something, 20 odd?
Indeed, I can... Councillor, absolutely. I do have a more up-to-date figure, so I can update that.
Next one was page 25, 1.29, about, wasn't sure about what, I can see what it's trying to say, but I think ensure that have different regimes will be separated to avoid duplication. Is it different? I'm not sure what regimes is the right word there.
Marion.
I'm sorry, Chair. I think that's semantics rather than grammar.
Yeah.
But I don't see any problem with regimes, personally. But anybody else have any problem with regimes? Just you, John. Not at the moment, John, but who knows what will happen in the future. We have to be prepared.
Um, 1.87, the last line, the whole borough. Do we have any boroughs in this district?
Sorry, Councillor, it should be district, and that has probably been in that policy since version 1.
So do I get extra points for age?
No, because you didn't spot it last time, John. Point taken away.
And the last one, no, but this isn't really a point, actually. Yeah, it's 3.8, page 39, recommended travel distances. I think what it's trying to say is that the exits are close to where the people are, where the customers are. Recommended travel distances could be thought of as this travel to the actual place itself. I just struck something there. Perhaps we might have a look at that.
I personally don't have an issue with travel distances because people have got to travel. Doesn't matter whether they're walking or running.
No,
or...
it's a size of.
Yes, I know, but they've
yeah.
still within access within recommended travel distances. So in other words, within a safe distance for people to get to exit. I can't think what else you would put there.
Okay, all right. Well, no, okay. The last point is that it's prevalent throughout. Is that licensing authority is sometimes with initial capital letters, and sometimes without. And there's many instances, and same with district and council. So, but I've made a note of some of them. But the global search and replace might be good.
As always, Councillor, thank you very much. I will make sure that those capitalisations are all amended and uniform across the document. Yeah. Indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Lorna.
Thank you. 2 points. The first one is another grammarian point at 1.93, which is on page 34, which starts licensing authority '(S). I'm assuming that means a plural rather than a possessive, so it ought to be authority, IES, without the apostrophe. However, I'm querying whether it should be plural in any case, because is that a general point about licensing authorities across the country, or should it be the licensing authority, as we have in, for example, 1.92? I would have thought it should say the licensing authority and be specific to us, even though it may well be a principle of general applicability. This is our policy for our district or borough. So that's my first point. My second point is one of content, though, and the responses we've received.
Sorry, can we just deal with the grammarian
I'm sorry,
first? If we can get that sorted, because otherwise it might get lost in the...
Indeed.
Stuart, do you have any comments about what you want to put? The licensing authority? Seems to...
Yes. With these policies, say some of these items which have been raised today have probably been in for previous versions and came from original government-assisted templates back in the day, which is why it probably was referring to licensing authorities in a plural. But I completely agree with Councillor that we can change 193 to make it specifically known to us. Yeah. Absolutely.
Want your point to get lost, Lorna. Right. Your second point.
Yeah. The other point is about the responses to the responses on page 10. And the Director of Public Health commented on para 1.15, wanting some specific wording aligning the policy to the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Health and Wellbeing Integrated Care Strategy and in turn back to this council's health and wellbeing strategy. That was recommended not to be changed. However, the request from the East Cambs Communities and Partnership Manager to align to specific Antisocial Behaviour Crime and Policing Act 2014 is recommended to replace. The reason given for not recommending adopting the Director of Public Health's wording was that the section keeps to headline areas rather than specific documents. And I wondered whether there was a difference of approach between that, which is keeping things very broad and vague, and the antisocial behaviour reference, which is making things very specific around a particular piece of legislation. I do think it's quite important to keep our policy aligned to health and well-being aims, because that's one of the fundamental things about licensing. I wondered whether, if we didn't accept the wording per se and the reference to the care strategy, the specific care strategies, that we could say something about keeping the policy aligned with health and well-being strategies locally and across Cambridgeshire, which doesn't tie it to a specific document, because it does seem to me to be a very fundamental point. But I'm just interested in the difference in approach between referencing specific documents. I appreciate one is legislation and one is a local strategy, but they're both capable of change.
Thank you, Councillor. You're absolutely right. Both are capable of being changed, but generally legislation tends to change far less frequently. And as we've put in about the latest Terrorism Act, it enables people to be guided, obviously, to that legislation. With regards to local policies and strategies, they obviously do change more frequently. But in answer to the specific question, unless I'm reading it sort of wrong, what it states in there is that in preparing this statement of licence policy, the licence authority has regards to and consulted with those involved in East Cambridgeshire District Council's local strategies on crime prevention, planning, transport, culture, tourism, community, e-government, health and well-being and economic development to ensure proper coordination and integration of these aims and actions of these policies. So then goes on to say review and amendment of these strategies will be considered on the impact of the licensing policy. So to me, I felt when I was reviewing the information and putting this together that the policy covered the issues that Councillor has raised. However, obviously, as again, I'm quite happy to go with Councillor's opinion on whether there should be. I do feel that with the legislation, we do have to reflect legislation. So that's the reason why Mr. Bege's comments were put in there. With regards to putting something more specific into paragraph 1.15, I'm I say, at the mercy of councillors. If you wish to see something more specific, absolutely, we can, that's what we're here to do.
Lorna, if Lorna, you'd like to come back, and then I've got Keith, and then is it John about this? No, is it about this? I just want conversation on Lorna's side. Sorry, I just wanted conversation about Lorna's point on this at this stage, rather than any new points. So, if, Lorna, if you would like to respond, and then I think Keith, your hand went up, and then John, or it might have been the other way around. But I'm sure you won't mind.
Sorry, Chair. I was trying to absorb what the officer was reading, and I don't do absorption of spoken word very well. But I think you referred, I think the officer referred to East Cambridgeshire policies on. Am I at the beginning that the document would reference East Cambridgeshire policies on?
Indeed. So consulted with those involved in East Cambridgeshire District Council's local strategies on...
That's my concern, because of course the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Health and Wellbeing Integrated Care Strategy is not an East Cambridgeshire strategy, and it seems to me that section ought at least to be widened to reference strategies of the combined authority and partners who make strategies which are, which need to be referenced here. And I'm quite happy not to have a specific strategy referred to for the reasons that the officers outlined, just that I think there ought to be reference to strategies that we do collectively as a combined authority and so on, which there doesn't seem to be in the existing wordings.
Okay, thank you, Lorna. Keith.
Chair. Well, specifically on this point, and looking at it in reverse order, I think fundamentally the change to 198 is correct, because if you actually look at the track changes that are there, it completely changes the emphasis of who is responsible and under what authority we act, and that makes it very clear in there as to the change. Whereas if you revert back to 115, it doesn't specifically mention any strategy other than our own policy, and whilst we don't have any control over the Antisocial Behaviour, Crime and Policing Act 2014, it's law, so we have to follow it. Equally, we don't have any control over the Combined Authority Health and Wellbeing Integrated Care Strategy, which could change from time to time, and we may or may not agree with aspects of it. So to say blindly that we are going to follow it sort of hamstrings us a bit, I fear, and I'm quite happy with leaving them as our licensing manager has already suggested.
Thank you, Keith. John, you had your hand up. Is it in response to Lorna's points? Mark, is this in response to Lorna's points? Yeah.
So I'm going to disagree with Keith there, because on the one hand we're saying we should have reference to what the government says. We should have reference, as it says at the moment, to what East Cambridgeshire says. We shouldn't have reference to what the Combined Authority says because we don't control it. But we are a member authority of the Combined Authority. And we are in a hierarchical government structure where we have the District Council, the Combined Authority and the government. So it seems to be anomalous if I use the most polite way of saying it, to reference government legislation, East Cambridgeshire strategies, but exclude the Combined Authority.
Landlocked. Does anybody have it? Yeah, of course you can, Stuart.
Sorry, Chair, thank you. It was just a possible suggestion that where at the moment it says East Cambridgeshire District Council's local strategies, that we just add in there and partners. Because obviously with things so in the next 5 years, there's going to be, obviously, as we know, a lot of change. And we have a lot of different partners, whether it's the Combined Authority, you know, and others out there. So we've just been having a discussion and think that it might be a suggestion to solve this impasse is to put partners.
Chair, I think that would be good because it would include the ICBs as well, or who are in turmoil but will land somewhere. And I think that partners do affect what we do. They do cover health. Our health strategy isn't the only one. I think referencing partners is a way to go, and I'm very happy to.
Everybody happy with that solution? Perfect, brilliant, well done. Thank you, Stuart. Now, who else had his hand up? Mark, on a separate point.
No, just
no,
that point. So
no,
I'm
just
done.
that point you don't want to speak. John, you had your hand up again?
Oh, yes, I did. I forgot to annotate page 36 on my covering list. Just a bit of wording there. H. Page 36. H on the top. For the organisation of, I thought something like illegal activities should be put in there. Of, it didn't read well, of, for example, of H. Yeah, okay. Okay.
By the end of where it says
Okay.
any premises license where there has been evidence of the following, and then it lists them.
Organisation of, yeah, activities such as
Any evidence of
activities such as racist, homosexual.
evidence of the following of use of licensed premises for the example of racist, homophobic or sexual abuse or attacks. Why does that not make sense?
That didn't. I'm not sure, but it didn't read well. Okay, never mind. I mean, if you.
But it makes sense.
Okay. Well, it makes sense when yes. And the other one was O. It says where serious risks to children. I thought any risk to children. I mean, if premises have any risks to children, they should be. It's not too serious. I mean, you know. I think any risk should be constrained.
Would define risk, though.
Take the word serious out.
Take the word serious out, where risks to children have been identified.
But what kind of risk? I mean, you could say that you know, they could fall over and I mean, serious risk is where they're going to be coming to some kind of physical or mental harm. Life is not risk-free, but you can
No.
ensure that children are kept as safe as possible from...
But serious risk means to say probably abduction or murder.
I think it covers more than that.
I think risk to children should be actually there. It just should be. I don't know what others feel.
Keith, you think you wanted to come back, and then Christine, and then Lorna?
Sure, I just wanted to come back on John's point, and I think he's almost there. Use of licensed premises for the organisation of, comma, for example, racist, homophobic, sexual abuse attacks or antisocial behaviour, or other antisocial behaviour, because these are all under the definition of antisocial behaviour. They would fall under that heading, and I think that completes the sentence. If
Thank you. This is a fairly minor point, but section 1 dot...
Hang on a second, Gareth. We're still talking about risks.
No,
Does anybody have any thoughts about... Personally, I'm quite happy with just leaving it where serious risks to children are. It's a question of degree, I think, John. Mark?
So, not a lawyer, but I think it's defined in the Children's Act 1989, serious risk to children.
Is it? I've no
So
idea.
I would suggest before we make any changes, we just check that there isn't a legal definition that...
Of serious risk,
yeah.
Do you know, John?
No.
No, fair enough. I'm personally content with serious risk because I think, you know, I don't know. I'm happy to go with what the committee thinks. Nobody seems to have any strong feelings about it. Christine's humming and hawing. Nobody has any serious doubts or worries about serious risks?
Chair, if I may. Obviously, this is in the section regarding reviews of licences and when action may or may not be taken. And it's always a last resort to do a review. We do all sorts of other engagement and mediation, etc., and things like that to try and resolve matters. I believe that there has to be a certain level of threshold because most premises that children go into have risks. As you say, there are premises out there in our district with climbing frames, with obviously trip hazards and whatever it may be that adults may not suffer with, but obviously children may. And I believe that, because it's within the section which is referring to reviews as opposed to all application basis, that serious is where it should remain at this point as a threshold.
Thank you, Stuart. And Martin has just pointed out in the previous sentence it says where serious risk to public safety. So it's measured. I think personally, I think I'm fine with leaving it as with serious risks. If everybody else is, I think everybody's nodding. Do we have any further questions for Stuart? Gareth, you did, yes, sorry.
Sorry, on 189, it says 70% of the levy must be paid to the Police and Crime Commissioner. Is that going to be too specific? Because everything seems to be changing and titles could well change. Do we need to be a bit more specific as to it's for police, isn't it? But if the mayor was to take over the responsibility of police and crime commissioner, it'd be different.
Again, I'm searching my grey matter at the moment, but I believe that in the legislation it actually states where this money has to go, and it is very specific. But we don't actually have a late night levy, so it's kind of irrelevant. But yeah. I understand the point that's been raised. But so I'm searching my grey matter, but I believe that it has to be worded as a police and crime commissioner, and the 70% is the level that has to be paid. Were members to introduce a late night levy, which we haven't got at this point in time.
So Gareth, I would think for reassurance, should we decide to start a late night levy, then its destination would then be agreed at that time, wherever we happen to be. Right, do we have any other questions for Stuart on this policy before we go to the vote? Right, okay. I'm happy to propose from the chair. Happy to second. Are we all in agreement with the amendments that we've all thrashed out in the last half an hour? Happy to proceed with this. Show of hands, please.
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you very much. Wonderful. Now we move on to agenda item number 6, which is the consideration of request from the trade to increase taxi fares. Over to you, Stuart.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm just trying to find the start of the report. There we go. Thank you very much. As you say, Chair, we're here to consider increasing the fares payable by members of the public to use an East Cambridgeshire District Council taxi, so they have Hackney carriages, following a formal request from members of the trade. The background to this is Section 65 of the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1976 gives the Council power to set fares within the district for the time and distance travelled and all other charges in connection with the hire of a Hackney carriage. Such fares are specified in the table of fares, which may be varied from time to time. Hackney carriage drivers are at liberty to charge lower than the specified table of fares, but are not permitted to charge higher for journeys taking place wholly within the district. Journeys commencing outside the district, due to a driver undertaking a pre-booked journey, for instance, do not need to be charged in accordance with the approved fare chart. Journeys commencing within the district and ending outside the district must be charged by the meter unless there's an agreement to pay more than the metered fare is made before the journey commences. So it's a bit sort of technical, but effectively it fully controls what Hackney carriages can charge if they were, for instance, picking you up off the rank and taking you to the hospital or Soham, Littleport, etc. If you were picking up off the rank and going to Chatteris, then they have to charge a metered fare unless you pre-agree, and they will normally do that when you book it, because they obviously can charge more because they've got the dead miles coming back into the district before they can actually apply for hire again. And if it's a remote journey, i.e. something where they effectively pick you up from Chatteris and take you to Stansted Airport, for argument's sake, then it's an agreed pre-booked fare that isn't covered by this. So the law requires any change to a table of fares, it must be advertised publicly in at least one local newspaper for a period of not less than 14 days before the proposed change takes effect. The public notice must also be available in the council offices for inspection free of charge at all reasonable hours during the consultation period. If no objections are received during the consultation period, then the charges outlined in the notice will come into effect on the date stated in the public notice. If objections are received and are not withdrawn, they must be considered by the council and a decision made to set a date for the proposed changes to the table of fares. Again, they can be modified or not. Such change to take effect not later than 2 months from the original date stated in the public notice, which is referred to in paragraph 3.3. The Council last varied its table of fares in 2022, with the current table of fares, which is table 8 in the report, coming into effect on the 28th of September 2022. Now, what I just ran through very, very quickly there was effectively just stating to members that the decision today will go out to consultation, and if there are objections, they will be heard by a further committee within the specified period. If there are no objections from the trade or members of the public, then those new fares will come into effect automatically on the stated date. Okay, so whenever fares are discussed, it's important to balance the right of a trade to earn a living, whilst at the same time reflecting that any upwards movement will have an impact on the very people the trade rely on to make their living. So it's a very balanced approach. There's a lot of work goes into trying to create that balance, and that's what the following report is hoping to do. So as I say, we take into account many areas because taxi drivers are businesses. They are also members of the public who have once they've paid all their business costs, they then obviously have their normal living costs to pay, rent, mortgages, etc., etc. So we look at fuel. So paragraph 4.3 on page 56, we start looking at fuel. And this is about the only bit of good news as such, and I think we all realise this. We're all motorists, I believe, so you will have noted that petrol and diesel prices since 2022 have reduced. Table 1 shows you the flow of petrol price since 2022 to when the last figure was available, which was July 25. And table 2 shows the diesel price. So what does this mean in real terms? It was costing an average taxi driver with a standard people carrier type vehicle running on diesel about £127 to fill their 70-litre tank in September 22, and is currently costing £98.77. A random selection of vehicles from the list of licensed Hackney carriages suggests an average taxi driver currently drives approximately 32,835 miles a year. So this decrease in fuel would equate to around £5,253 a year in fuel at 40 miles per gallon. One thing we will see in this report, there are a lot of estimations because there are so many moving parts, there are so many different parameters. You know, if you've got a vehicle out there that's a hybrid doing sort of 80 miles to the gallon, then obviously, you know, so we have to look at an average in a lot of different areas. So that fee which would be around 5,253 now, was 6,788 in September 22, so a decrease of £1,535 in costs. Vehicle insurance. Again, this is a more tricky one. It's almost impossible to obtain taxi insurance price information charted over a period of time specifically for the taxi trade. But these charts, which I've produced into this report, show the general trend of insurance prices have obviously risen and have then dropped off, but overall have still risen. So there's always a danger these days of using AI to sort of help with the search results that you're doing. But I did, you know, use AI. I've declared that in the report so everybody knows. But it does come back suggesting that there's been an average increase of around 11% annually since 2022, resulting in premiums being around a third higher in 2025 than they were in 2022. Taxi insurance premiums are always higher than standard insurance policies. It's an area where a lot of claims are put in, so it's a higher risk area. There's also the public liability element to it as well, because you've got fare paying passengers. So it's estimated that an average driver would have paid about £1,850 in 2022, and we're now paying in the region of £2,500 for the same cover. Again, anecdotally, conversations with our operators have suggested that figure is pretty accurate even. Vehicle maintenance and depreciation. So the cost of compliance test in 2022 varied from garage to garage, as it does now, but it was approximately £55 every 6 months for a vehicle over 6 years, and every 12 months for vehicles under 6 years of age, and largely remains the same now. So on the compulsory compliance test, the fee is relatively stable. But we did have a phone around to a number of our approved garages that suggests that due to increases made by the government in employer national insurance and other contributory factors, whilst there remains a very competitive market for vehicle servicing and maintenance, they have increased their hourly rates approximately 14% since 2022. They've also advised that the costs of parts, which are routinely replaced, such as brakes, tyres, oil, are noticeably higher since 2025, and around 30% is as an average. Some items have actually gone up more than that, they were saying, some slightly less, but it was again roughly a third higher. So you can sort of see kind of the sort of costs that they have to pay out on tyres, road duty, servicing, brakes, and then depreciation allowance, which is another really big factor that was, again, anecdotally raised with us, that the cost of second-hand vehicles, I'll remind councillors that the second-hand vehicles coming into our fleet for all standard vehicles have to be Euro 6, so that has put a 2015 age limit effectively in place. And if anybody has looked recently for second-hand cars, they will probably appreciate that 5 years ago they would have got certain vehicles a lot cheaper than they will now. There have been a lot of different factors around that. Government quotas on the amount of cars that can be produced with petrol and diesel, tied to the amount that are produced by for electric and hybrid, has had an impact. People not purchasing as many new cars, which means there's fewer cars coming into the second-hand market as well. So the depreciation allowance will have to increase to enable us to keep a modern fleet and enable the drivers to replace vehicles that historically may have cost £10,000 but are now more likely to cost around 20 in that time. Licence fees remain at the same level since 2022, so they're in Table 3. In addition to licence fees, insurance and vehicle compliance, drivers also have to provide us with a medical certificate, pay for a DVLA licence check annually and subscribe to the DBS update service, and it's estimated these costs are approximately £45 to £50 per annum. Medicals are every 3 years. DBS is, they're all on the update service, which is approximately £13, I believe it still is, per annum. And then we run a check on their DBS 3 times a year. They don't have to pay for that though, because the payment to keep them on the update service means that our check is free. But as I say, it's estimated at £45 to £50. Now, another obviously factor that we're all at risk of every day is inflation. And whilst more recent reports were that the inflationary figure had dropped, I believe, to around 3%, certainly in the period from 22 to 25, real-term world income has reduced by approximately 7% per year. So to put fares into context, it's useful to estimate how much of an impact the different factors that I've just gone through has had. And there's no such thing as a standard taxi driver. Some taxi drivers work predominantly in the evening when Tariff 2 would be applicable. Others work during the day. Others dip in and out of doing hackney work and private hire work. So there's a lot of different sort of factors. Now, as I say, we know from doing the quick sort of run through of our hackneys that the figures, mileage figures per year, which clearly dropped off when we were in this COVID and post-COVID era, they've crept back up, and it does appear that the average vehicle travels around 32,835 miles a year at present. But that's not all chargeable mileage. So what we tend to do is reduce that figure by 50% to take into account the so-called dead miles. So that's when they've taken you to the station, or they've taken you to Soham, and then they haven't been able to pick up a fare to get back to Central Ely. And also because a number of our drivers do use their vehicles for domestic journeys as well, taking the kids to school, shopping trips, etc. So we reduce the full journey down by 50% to take that into account. Table 4 shows that we've got chargeable mileage of approximately 16,500, and then we look using a government DFT estimations on how many journeys are so a mile, how many are 2 miles. We estimate that the percentage of journeys that are a mile is 3%. The vast majority of journeys are between 2 and 5 miles, and then obviously there are longer journeys, and that's taken from the DFT's consultation exercise that they then produce a report on. So that then works out in the next column along roughly the miles that will be charged on the 1 mile rate, and then the final column is the total estimated income in 2022 using the current table of fares. And what you have is the total amount, and then in brackets how much it was per trip. Okay, so the reason it's per trip in the first column is because it's just 1 mile, and then the reason it changes to being saying per mile in the next columns down, in the next rows down, is because obviously it's more than 1 mile, therefore it's the average mileage cost, in that way. So total estimated income in 2022 was approximately 45,872. And total income required in 2025 to offset inflationary figures based on a cumulative 21% increase, so it was at 7% per year, would be about 55,000. So to be effectively to be in the same position now that we were in 2022 when the fares were last set, they would need to be looking to achieve around £55,500. Now, Table 5 shows a summary of the estimated gains and losses over the last 5 years. Sorry, 3 years, that should read, not 5 years. So Table 5 is, hopefully sets this out, and it is a bit of a complex calculation, but what we have is petrol, as I've stated already, going down, associated licensing costs remaining neutral, vehicle and maintenance costs going up by roughly 30%, insurance going up by the same. And then the final column is the inflationary adjustment on earnings. And what that is trying to say is that £45,872 in 2022 buys you effectively what 36,000 would be now. And then the total as such of a deficit that we're trying to plug the gap, I suppose, is what we're saying, is the impact of 9,633 added to the 650, added to the 2718, minus the only positive in their pockets, which was the £1,535 lowering of fuel. And that comes out showing that there's a net loss over the 3-year period, showing that there is an £11,500 shortfall between what their money purchased in 2022 and what it purchases in 2025. So moving on to section 5, the information available shows that whilst licensing costs and other associated costs such as driver medicals, DBS and compliance testing remain static, the cost of purchasing and maintaining suitable Euro 6 second-hand vehicles is significantly higher than in 2022. Inflationary factors affect drivers and the community also, and it would be appropriate to consider increasing fares to a point where taxi drivers are the only members of the community who are entirely ring-fenced from all of these economic pressures. However, it's important to acknowledge that taxi drivers are affected by both increasing direct business costs and increasing domestic expenditure caused by inflationary factors, so they get hit on sort of both sides, really, when they're looking at total income. Members of the public choose to use a service when it's reliable, affordable, and so increasing fares can have a negative impact on a driver's take-home pay. Simply, if people don't jump in a taxi to take a journey and find other options, then it doesn't matter how much you put the fares up by, income will obviously decrease. So, as I say, if it's not affordable, people will opt to other modes of transportation. Or simply not travel at all. And in this day and age when we can all use electronic meeting systems and things like that, then obviously that has potential impacts. Each area of the country has unique socioeconomic factors to contend with, but it's worth noting how our table of fares places us compared to our nearest neighbouring authorities, who will have similar socioeconomic factors, and that's what Table 6 illustrates. The figures in brackets show where we sit as such. So East Cams is currently sitting in 5th position with a 2-mile fare on rate 1 and 6th place on a 2-mile fare on rate 2. Okay. So conclusion, as detailed in the report, licensed drivers only earn a living if people use their service, so increasing fares can actually have a negative impact and result in an income reduction. Having said this, the trade have requested a review of the fares, and the evidence suggests that there's a good cause to increase the fares that can be lawfully charged in order to offset the increased financial burdens the trade is finding itself subjected to. It's suggested that lowering the flag yardage from 1 mile or 1,760 yards to 960 yards and lowering the flag rate to £4.20 on rate 1 will increase every journey taken by £1, and increasing the rolling rate from 20 to 25p on rate 1 and 30 to 35p on rate 2 would create an overall increase in fares of approximately 20% across all fares and travel times. Table 7 illustrates how this would be achieved, and Table 8 shows the current fare chart. So it gives you a comparison on those two, I say, what's existing and what's proposed to go out to consultation. So, financial implications on this. From a taxi proprietor's point of view, the recommendation in this report would see a driver earning an average of 20% more than is currently doing, according to the Department for Transport's 2023 Private Hire and Taxi Statistics document. The impact comparison, which is Table 9, shows how the difference, the proposed figures to go out to consultation increases income by 10,233. So not quite the 11,500, but very, very close to it. From a customer point of view, the lowering of the initial flag yardage from 1 mile to approximately 6/11 of a mile with a lower flag rate will see their average trip increase by 85p per journey on rate 1. Commuters returning to a city prior to 9 p.m. will still benefit from accessing chart level 1 as opposed to 2, so we're not looking to switch that charge rate at this point. From an operator's point of view, these changes should enable them to cover the associated costs of employing drivers for unsociable hours, and increases should also allow them to continue to invest in their fleet, especially the drive towards lower CO2 emitting vehicles. The recommended increase, should I say, will place the Council's Tariff 1 fares in 3rd position, and also Rate 2 in 3rd position, and that's, you'll see in Table 10, shows where we go. So we go from being 5th and 6th to 3rd in both columns. And finally, the legal implications. As mentioned in paragraph 3.3, any changes made must be advertised. Any consultation responses must be brought to a further committee to determine whether any amendments should be made. Due to this, it is recommended that the 1st of October 2025 is used as a date of commencement. The cost of this notice is covered in the licensing budget, so that's the cost of placing the advert in the paper. That timeline, doing it like that, will enable us to have the consultation. If there are no comments, everything will come into effect on the 1st of October. If there are comments, it enables us to hear those comments in November and have everything done and dusted before the 2-month deadline, which is in December. So that's why the date of 1st of October is suggested. As I say, if we fail to observe the regulations, the result would be unlawful tariff of fares that can't be enforced. So it's really important that we do things in the right way. And obviously officer time has been used to prepare this report. It is not an easy report to prep. There's a lot of different pieces of information, but hopefully it's presented councillors with the information they need to make a decision.
Thank you, Stuart. Questions to Stuart? I've got one from Martin. Any other questions for Stuart? Mark, Keith? Oh, crikey, you all went up at once. Let's do Lorna, Lee and John. You can round up. Martin, away you go.
Thank you, Chair. Just one thing, Stuart. There's nothing in the tables about hybrids and electric cars. Obviously, electric charging has gone up over the years, but the taxi firms seem to have more and more electric vehicles and hybrids. Would that take into effect in the future?
You are correct, but in the Hackney area of our trade, I'm not aware that we have any pure electric vehicles. So this is a specific issue for Hackneys as opposed to private hire. We do have hybrids within the Hackney fleet, but they are petrol driven. They're not sort of plug-in using EV points. So it's a very good point to make. We'll continue to monitor if we get obviously an influx of EV vehicles coming in to the fleet. But yes, you're right. Those figures have increased over over the 3-year window. But because we haven't yet really got any vehicles of that nature, that's why it's not in this report at this point.
Thank you, Stuart. Mark.
Thank you, Stuart. Thanks for the report. My point is really about Table 7, and I'm envisaging the ideas. I'm largely in favour of the rise. I think no rise for the 3 years, haven't gone through what we've gone through. But I have a vision in my mind of a disabled person arriving at the station in Ely and wanting to go to the business park or just around the corner at the back of Tesco's. Right? They have no choice but to use transportation to get there. I'm envisaging they can't walk, etc., etc. That seems an excessive payment for a necessity-driven short thing, whereas an able-bodied person arriving at the station is choosing not to walk. That seems a fair penalty, if that's the right phrase. But I'm just... You're probably talking in excess of £5 to get a taxi from Ely Station around to that business park. Is there any consideration at all for differing rates for differing users?
Yeah, no. In short, no. Actually, the reduction of the flag rate from a mile to the suggested figure of 960 yards. That journey is the one you use as an example, is probably that flag rate. At the moment, all journeys up to a mile are charged. So if you went 150 yards, you would be paying £4.60 to do. So at the moment, it doesn't make any difference if you're doing 100 yards or 1,760 yards. You will pay the flag rate, which is £4.60. With the suggestion, if you were doing a journey that's under or up to 960 yards, you would pay £4.20. So it doesn't start to charge somebody more until they get towards the mile, but there is no facility within the sort of fare structure to charge different areas of a community different rates. Now, other authorities across the country have introduced a concessions token scheme as such to help those areas that you suggest, people with disabilities where they need transportation, and effectively the individual themselves are given the money and benefits via one of these token schemes, which they then use and give to the drivers, and the drivers then bring them into the council, and the council redeems the tokens that have been received, which effectively lowers the cost of those journeys for those areas of a community that require it. Now, we don't have a scheme like that at this point in time. Obviously, people who are getting personal independence payments and things like that will have a mobility element put into play, which enables their benefits to be slightly higher than somebody who doesn't need that mobility allowance. And that obviously can then be used for its purpose, which is to provide them access to vehicles, whether it's a Hackney carriage or indeed if it's a private hire. So there are other areas as such that assist in this situation you're talking about.
Yeah, and I do appreciate that, but that's a couple of very good points you made there. I'm left with the overriding feeling that it's somewhat disproportionately more unfair for short journey needs of disabled people than others. But I don't know how we can fix that. I wish I could wave a magic wand and say, and this is how we answer it. But it was just jumped out to me that kind of journey, that journey that's probably happening every day, you're penalised for, really.
I would, sorry, Councillor, I would just reiterate, as I say at the moment, that those short journeys would be costing £4.60. That short journey potentially under the new tariff would cost £4.20. So it will only become more expensive than the current £4.60 once they obviously tick over to around about 2/3 of a mile. So I do appreciate what you're saying, but actually in some respects a lower flag rate actually can be of an assistance on very short journeys.
And am I right in thinking we're looking at the maximum that they can charge? If they choose to charge less, they're quite entitled to do so. They can't charge more. Is that right?
Indeed, Chair, that is exactly right.
So individual taxi drivers could make the decision not to charge that disabled person more, which would be very kind of them, but this is the maximum that they can charge rather than the minimum that they can charge. No, so Keith.
Yeah, I am impressed with the huge amount of analysis of all the variables that's gone in comparing 2022 to 2025. And pretty much it's faultless. You know? And then, right at the end, slipped in at the end, so it's not all going to be well done, is this reduction of a mile to 6/11ths of a mile. And so for those people who literally, as Mark's alluded to, want to go over that 6/11th of a mile, but up to the mile, they are going to see an increase. And there doesn't appear to be any analysis or any reasoning or rationale why we want to reduce a mile to 6/11ths of a mile. That's question one. I don't know if you want to deal with that first. Okay, I'll come back if I may.
Depends how complicated your second question is, but let's go with this.
Thank you, Councillor. When you look at the table of fares, you have to look at what the meters are capable of doing as well, and then look at what you're trying to achieve. So obviously, what we're trying to achieve here is a figure of approximately £11,000, as I say. That's what we're trying to plug the gap. When you look at so the rolling mile of 0.25 per, after the flag rate, you go in increments of generally 5s and 10s, because otherwise you end up with odd figures which don't work very well with the meters. So when we speak to the meter companies, they tend to like that the additional clicker rate, as such, the rolling rate goes up in 5s and 10s, because it helps with the units. And what you can do is you can change the distance. So you change the distance for each one of those clicks goes over. So you could set it at 5p and do it 5p every 50 yards or whatever, as long as the multiple of, which wouldn't work in that example I've just given, but the multiples of 50 end up at 1760 per mile. So that's where you've got all these different calculations. So when I ran numerous different scenarios to effectively get to where we need to get to, and make that everybody as such is kind of taking, I'm trying to think of the right word to say, so everybody's impacted by it, rather than just a few areas of the travelling public who would then have an artificially higher level put onto them because of the time that they choose to travel. As I said in the report, by reducing that flag rate, it means that the original flag rate level means that everybody's paying about 85p to £1 more per journey. That's what we're talking about, which is about a 20% increase. And by doing that across every journey, you end up, because you've got 16,000 miles of travel, that's not 16,000 trips. That's there are obviously a lot fewer trips than miles covered, and so every trip, regardless of the distance, is going to be at least £1, and that helps to get to that £11,000 figure very easily and fairly by apportioning it across the spectrum. But as I said to the other councillor, is that by also lowering that flag rate, those journeys that are sometimes taken by, say, disabled people, which are shorter journeys, can potentially pay no increase at all and actually pay less. But it is a complex, as I say, a complex way of looking at things. There are many different parameters at play, but as I say, the main thing was the most effective way to ensure that the impact is felt by everybody across the board, but also taking into account that those with incredibly short journeys might actually benefit, was to lower that flag rate and increase the rolling rate by the figures in the report. It's not necessarily perfect, but as the Chair said earlier, it is the maximum that they can charge. Generally, those people who are arriving into a district will generally have private hire bookings. There are obviously hackneys sitting on the rank, but unfortunately, and this is well documented in our district, we don't really have a great deal of wheelchair accessible vehicles, and we certainly don't have any sat on the ranks. So that whilst I understand that some disabilities don't necessarily require a wheelchair, that this sort of the hackney side of things is not utilised so much by people who are in wheelchairs and stuff, because we haven't got them in the fleet. The trade just don't buy them. So the rolling thing was to affect every trip taken, to enable we got around the 11,000, and that it impacted every journey, with hopefully the benefit, small benefit perhaps, on incredibly short journeys actually being slightly cheaper than what they were on the current fare.
Right. So, on the basis that, according to these figures, less than 3% of journeys will be 6/11ths of a mile, bearing in mind that only 3% are a mile, the chances of somebody doing 960 yards in a taxi, I'd be surprised if many taxi drivers would be keen to take on too many people that want to go 960 yards up the road, but I won't question their morality in that respect. But It seems as if what we've done is we've said, how do we get an extra £11,000 a year for taxi drivers and reverse engineer a way of actually earning them an extra £11,000 or thereabouts. So, okay, I'll leave that. I've just done a quick back of the fag packet calculations that if this policy is passed on the comparison between the current and future incomes. And apart from those 3% that are up to a mile, where the increase is 18.5%, all of the others are above 20%, and in fact, closer to, well, for the 5 miles, which is the bulk, is 22.7, for 9 miles, 23.5, 24.3, and for the longest, over 25 miles, 24.5%. So that sort of works out over the average, and again, I know this is very simple maths, you divide those numbers by 3, so that's an average of sort of 6, 7, 8% a year increase over the last 3 years. And I know they haven't had an increase in each of those 2003, 2004, etc. But that I'm not sure how you end up with the difference of 22% when clearly the majority of the journeys are well above the 22% figure. So just throwing that in so that when people decide how they vote, they are aware that it is quite an increase. I'm not saying it's not justified, but I guess it comes down to the fact that if you trust that the analysis that's been done, which I've already said I do, and we've established that an increase of the £11,000 a year is justified, then I guess what we have to accept, however much we like or don't like increasing prices, in order for these people to stay in business and to earn a fair wage, I guess we don't have an awful lot of choice.
Thank you, Keith. I believe Lorna was next. No? Did you put your hand up?
Sorry, my question was asked by Councillor
Oh,
Gazal earlier in the
perfect.
meeting.
Okay, thank you. Lee, I believe you're next.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Stuart. Might be a moot question. It's a two-pointer. First point is, do we have any evidence of the percentage of Hackney rides to pre-booked at all? And
I can say that there is no in-house information on that because we don't collate it. It's effectively so we wouldn't know how many people are doing Hackney journeys compared to private hire. What I can say to you is that Hackney carriage trade is numbers-wise is in decline. When I first came here 10 years ago, we had approximately 125 Hackney carriages licensed at any given time. And at the last count, I believe that was around 88, around that sort of figure. So the number of available Hackney carriages has decreased as people are switching to private hire vehicles and doing more of the pre-booked and school contract work.
Want to get it right. So does that mean that we obviously haven't got any evidence of the impact then of what these increases could have on pre-books then?
Yeah, so we won't know what the impact of these fares will be on the Hackney carriage side. My gut feeling on this is that that putting a 20% increase in, as I say, and it will go to public consultation, so obviously the public and trade will have a voice on this as well, will not be something that the Hackney trade will religiously charge up to. I don't believe they will do that. I think that what they'll look at is what the market forces are doing, and they will sit in and align their prices to those of the private hire, because they are in competition. Nowadays, when you don't have to be attached to a landline to obviously get a private hire, you can get it through an app, you can get it on your mobile phone. So in that regard, the old way and the old differences are very much sort of disappearing. And so people, who would back in the day, come out and grab a cab at Hackney off the rank because they didn't have any other way. They're now usually sat inside the pub on a phone, selecting their different providers and booking before they go outside. So that's, I believe, why we're already seeing a decrease in the number of Hackney carriages, and then also the fact that private hire can charge what they wish to charge as long as you pre-agree it. And I believe those fees, they do vary. Obviously, you get slightly more discount per mile when you do a longer journey than if you're doing a shorter one. But at the moment, I believe the 22 figure that the trade are currently kind of almost held to ransom, contracted to charge, is a serious sort of detriment to the trade at this point in time.
Yeah, thank you. But would it not be helpful to get some idea of what the private hire are charging then, so we can sort of align with that? Because we're just taking the Hackney side of it, and not because if more people are using private hire, potentially it'd be interesting to know how, if it does affect the majority of people rather than the minority of people. So
again, with the Hackney trade, what this table does is it looks at all of the impacts that are affecting the Hackney trade. When if we were to look at the private hire, there's no real standard private hire. Somebody who's doing executive private hire may be charging £7 or £8 a mile, so they can recover the cost of a £70,000 Jaguar. Somebody who's got a private hire that they routinely take somebody on a set journey may well be charging lower than these figures. So whereas with Hackney work, it's something that's almost prescribed, it's set in stone. You are a Hackney, you're going to be applying for hire, i.e. you can be flagged down, or you're going to be sat on a rank, and you're going to just be doing that public hire work. Private hire covers a whole raft of different incarnations. And because of that, I know anecdotally that there are companies out there who charge private hire rates at the higher end of the market and then ones at the lower end of the market. But they have to retain certain information on their booking records, but the cost of the fare is not one of them. So it's almost an impossible ask. So what we just do is we look at the specifics and say we know how much these people are having to pay for their vehicles. Again, I know from the conversations I've had with the operators in our area that vehicles that they were originally 5 years ago were paying sort of 25,000 for are now more likely to be near on 40,000 for the same level of spec of vehicle. So what we have to look at is the known items. We know the cost of insurance, we know the cost of petrol, we know the cost of all the license fees and the cost of the vehicle side of things, and we know what inflation's doing because obviously we look at the different inflation markers, and we set the rate as a maximum that particular type of trade can charge. Now then the public have two options. They say, I'm happy to pay that, and I will do that because that is what I need to pay, or they will get on their apps or they'll get on a private hire operator and say, what can you do this journey for? And if the private hire operator says, well, I can do it for £10 and yet the Hackney is going to charge them 15, then they use their feet and they walk and they wait for the private hire to come along. So that's why, as I say in the report, it's a balancing act between enabling the trade to make a living, but obviously to be still appealing to those who require that service as a public immediate hire basis on the cost which they incur. And it's set as a maximum so that if they have repeat business, if they're fulfilling a job where they feel actually it's a longer journey, I'm quite happy to take this much as a fixed fare, then they can do that. But yeah, unfortunately at this point in time, as much as we can look at booking records for private hire operators, they are not legally obliged to retain how much the cost of that journey is or tell us how much they're making from those activities.
Thank you, Stuart. Speaking from personal experience, pre-booked taxi journeys into Cambridge are probably 30% more than they are now than they were 2 years ago. And you either do it or you don't. Simple as that. John, I think, is next.
Thank you.
Sorry, Stuart, you're going to be exhausted at this rate. You're wearing,
I'm always nervous.
First
oh,
of
I
all,
know. We all are. We all are.
Stuart, I'd like to commend this report because it's got teeth in it, you know, it's got diagrams, it's got figures, it's the whole thing, and, you know, a really comprehensive, I thought, analysis. I do have a couple of queries, as ever. Don't roll your eyes like that, Chair.
Are they spelling?
No.
Oh, good.
You mentioned that the maintenance and things costs, I think at one time, were 30%. Actually, if you look at the figures, it's 120%. I suppose that's due to the depreciation allowance mostly. It's not labour costs, but it is 120% increase. That's one thing. The other one is what figure should we use for salary increase, which is really, or wage increase? 7%. If we look at this council, I don't know what the percentage increase of salaries was in this council, but I suspect it's somewhere around about, what? 3.2. So maybe, I think everyone's feeling the pinch about not keeping up with inflation. Maybe 7% is quite a large sum to go, 7% is quite large to go to. The other thing I was going to say was, I'm delighted you explained why those little figures in brackets are in table 6. It puzzled me for ages. I mean, I never got that code. Thank you very much. And also, I'd like to say to Councillor Horgan that if you have the flag rate, first 960 yards, the actual cost per mile is at least 7.7 per mile, pounds. So actually, if I were a taxi driver, I'd far rather have short journeys of the flag rate. I mean, I've had a discussion with Stuart about this point, about how the figures should be done in Table 5. I'm not sure I agree with him, but I do think, I'm not sure that, first of all, I don't think 7% we ought to be aiming for, because I think compared to other wages in this locality, using the council one as a possibility, we have, everything is, not everyone actually has that increase all the time. So I think this flag rate is right. I'm not sure about the other increases.
Do you want to come back, Stuart, or shall I?
Yeah.
I'm assuming that, then bear in mind the fact that they haven't had any kind of increase at all for 3 years. And also they've got national insurance contributions, and they do have to pay a premium to get people to work late at night.
Okay.
I mean, Stuart, if I'm wrong, shut me up. But Mark, did you want to come back on this point, or is it a different point? Okay. Let's just, Stuart, answer John, and then you can chirp in.
I completely agree that you know, when other areas of the economy are only receiving 3.2% like public sector, etc., but it seems excessive. But it comes back to the fact that the bulk of the cost that is being incurred by the trade, you do have the inflationary factors for certain, and so at 11,000 sort of gap as such between 2022 and 2025, some of that is inflationary factors. Obviously, one of the bigger areas is the vehicle costs. Now, we as members of the public, make a choice on having a vehicle to make our lives better as such, or more convenient. Members of the trade have no choice but to have a vehicle because, quite frankly, without stating the obvious, you can't be a taxi driver without a vehicle. And what we want as a council is we want a modern, clean, efficient trade. And the problem is that because of the fact that the government's quotas, etc., all the various shifts that happen because of COVID are now playing through, that there is a shortage of vehicles that are available to be utilised as taxis. they're going up and they are costing a premium. And so whilst some of this increase is no doubt at all going to be going towards their post-business cost income, a lot of this additional sort of the 20% side of things we're talking about is looking at recovering the costs of running the actual business element of what they do, which is what we want to see. We don't want to see vehicles getting to 10, 15 years of age and not keeping up and being modern. It brings no end of other issues with it for that. And I think the public would want to also see that. And as I say, some people won't make, if we agree these figures, and as I say, a consultation happens and there are no comments, but some people will not be making £11,000 extra because we've just put these figures up by 20,000. You'll have person X who's only working part-time, or you'll have some, person Y will be working a few hours on an evening. So yes, they will earn more money, but the amount that they do will be very much on a case-by-case basis. What we're trying to do is look at a way to ensure that the trade remains a viable option, because if a continued reduction happens from, as I say, the 125-ish vehicles we had to around 88 to 90 vehicles that we have now, that's already, that's a third or a quarter almost off the level that we used to have. And there is a serious risk that if the trade don't find it viable to be within the Hackney carriage environment, that you'll go to a stands and there won't be one there. And everything will be private hire. So I think the bottom line is that people need to pay for a service that's reliable and support that service, and obviously have their voice via the consultation exercise. But as I say, going back to the original point, yes, it does seem higher than that, but as I say, it's because we're looking at recovering the business costs and the domestic household income increase to enable them to put food on the table, etc. as well. So there's the two elements which makes it look quite a lot higher.
Happy? Well, content. Not going to get into a next essential conversation with you, John, at this point. Mark, did you want to come back on John's point and then make your own?
It's essentially the same point that John was making. So the analysis is all based on inflationary increases. And when I first looked at the report, I thought 20%, it looks a lot. But then I went back and did the check myself as when the rates were last set and today, and it's clear that the inflationary impact is overall general inflation is just over 20%, because I think we forget that in 2022, 2023, inflation was in double figures. But what concerns me is, I understand a bit about keeping food on the table, but when inflation was running at, in double digits, people weren't getting, the people who are paying for the tax, the users weren't getting double-digit increases to keep up with inflation. And if you look at average earnings, they've fallen significantly over that same period, are significantly behind inflation. So I think we have that difficult story to tell to residents, is that we're doing an analysis looking at keeping the trade's income in line with inflation. But most of those people out there haven't seen that with their own personal incomes. And I just wonder, when the analysis is done, why we don't also look at the trends in earning increases, because in this particular case, they're substantially below the inflationary increases over the last 3 years.
Thank you, Councillor. We do look and make comment on the fact that that the taxi trade shouldn't be entirely ring-fenced from the inflationary factors that we all obviously have to deal with. But without sort of repeating myself, a lot of the impacts that they're having to deal with in order to provide a vehicle on the rank are those costs which are incurred before they get to, like, say, the rest of us, where we have a PAYE. That's what your salary is, that's what you've got to pay your rent, mortgage, bills, etc. they've already had these business incurred costs that they have no choice and they're at the mercy of. So we're sitting here now, and obviously petrol prices are reasonable, let's say, you know, certainly more reasonable than they were 3 years ago. But we might be sat here in 3 months' time and they will be, you know, off the charts again. And you know, that would be an impact that the trade would have to incur. So, again, you know, we understand, and we do understand, that members of the public obviously have, you know, less money to pay out for their journeys. But if we don't enable the trade to earn the extra money to afford vehicles, etc., then, as I say, the trade dies, and then public won't have any option. And just to go back and say, you know, that, you know, I do appreciate, you know, the increases, and again, this is something that, yes, I've worked on it, but you know, the public and the trade will have an overall say before it comes back to councillors, obviously, to approve it if they don't agree with what we agree today. These rates don't put us to number one in the charts in our local area. We're still third. So whilst it is an increase, because we haven't had one in 3 years, it still doesn't put us ahead of other socio-economic areas within the greater Cambridgeshire area. So, you know, hopefully that provides a bit of balance, I suppose, to it.
The fact that the other areas in our, or other districts in our area haven't done a review since 2022, so they'll probably be putting their fees up as well. Are you happy with that, Mark? You okay with that?
I think I'll leave that for the debate, but yes.
Who do we have next? We have Christine, who was mouthing something to me and I can't lip read, sorry.
I understand, did Mark, was this relevant, the question you wanted to, so mine's a different question completely. Okay, so going back to DBSs, I assume that the drivers or the vehicle owners have to apply for them themselves, yeah? And how many are actually required to? Is it part of the requisite of actually operating? I probably should know that answer, but I would like you to clarify that, please. Whether it's just the hackneys or whether private hire vehicles have to, and also if it's just for specific jobs.
Okay, no, Councillor, that's absolutely fine. So every single driver that we license, whether they're a Hackney carriage, what we call a joint, so they're the ones who can drive Hackney carriage and private hire, or whether they're a private hire or restricted private hire, all drivers licensed by us have to have a DBS on application. Now, for, cracking, time flies, but it's probably about at least 6 years now, I believe. Every driver has an obligation to register on the DBS update service, which is, I said 13, you think you're right, it has just gone up to 16. And that's an annual fee. And then what we do as officers is every 4 months, so if I was to run a DBS check on you today, your expiry date would be put into our system for 6 months' time. In 4 months' time, we will go onto the update service and run the check. And if everything's okay and it comes back saying it's all clear, it's all current, we update you for another 6 months. Now, if at that point you had fallen off the update service or a crime had been committed and the information tells us to run another check, then they would have to do another DBS check, which will be, again, depending on the provider, around £50. But whilst they're on that and paying that £16, we run it, effectively we're running a check every 4 months. And the reason we do it like that is so if they fall off, they've got 2 months before the clearance expires.
Thank you.
Christine Ambrose-Smith.
Thank you. Reverting back to the matter of private hire and executive hire, particularly at the higher end, it could be considered that information around charges, fees, might be commercially sensitive. I would guess that probably be more metropolitan areas where you are, you know, dealing with sort of, I don't know, much higher charges, but nevertheless, they might be unwilling to reveal their charges.
I agree entirely. Again, I know only anecdotally, and the economics will play out, but if you are providing an executive service and you've just spent out £70,000 on a vehicle, you have to charge more per mile to recover that over the life of that vehicle. More so than somebody who's gone out and spent 20,000 on a vehicle. It's basic economics, and yes, you are right. I don't believe, well, there's no legal obligation for them to tell us what they're charging per mile for private hire, so we wouldn't be able to get that information.
Thank you, Christine. Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I assume that taxis and hire vehicles have to have vehicle excise duty, ELI tax discs.
Yep, they all have to be. They all have to have a tax disc, and vehicles which are over the 3 years of age have to have an MOT, but they have to have a compliance after 12 months.
Yeah, the reason I brought this up is vehicles that cost more than £40,000 also have an extra £300 put on top of that as well. So that's another factor to put in.
Yeah, indeed, Councillor's correct. Vehicles up to 5 years of age have the higher saying customs road tax, whatever you want to call it, but they do have a higher burden. Again, it's not referred to in the report because whilst the trade some do lease new vehicles, the majority within the Hackney carriage fleet are outside of that restriction. But it's definitely there if they were to buy the new vehicle.
Thank you, Stuart. Mark.
Yes, Stuart, just a point on 2.1, the recommendations. Is the 1st of October truly achievable? Because what I'm thinking is it's Wednesday today. If you were super efficient and this was agreed and you got your 14-day notice put in a local paper tomorrow, it's not going to make publication in the local paper tomorrow. So that would be next Thursday, which would take us past the October the 1st of the 14 days. Well, 18 plus 14 is 32. Well, I'm assuming the local paper. I'm assuming the local paper would be something like the Ely Standard or that kind of local paper, which are published on a weekly basis. Yes, there's online versions, but the actual physical paper is published on a Thursday, and I think the deadline to get into that is on a Tuesday lunchtime, something like that, to get an edited item into it. So what I'm saying is, I admire the ambition to get this done as quick as possible, but I think you might have set yourself up to fail there. I'm very happy that to be taken away, but I just, it seemed a fairly obvious situation to me.
Sorry, Councillor. So you're saying, so it was my intention to pass all this information to the papers today, for them to publish it on the 16th, and then that would take us to the 30th, and then it would be effective on the 1st. Are you advising me that that would not be possible?
My understanding of it may have changed, so please double check it. My understanding, if you are targeting the Ely Standard, which would be probably the most likely one, I don't know, then their editing deadlines used to be by Tuesday, which is the 16th, right, for publication on the Thursday, on the 18th. The 18th plus a 14-day period takes us past October the 1st. It takes it inclusive of October the 1st, actually. No, but I'm just looking at, if you look at the 3.3 and 3.4, it specifies a newspaper. I don't know whether the categorisation would allow for an online version of that, because that's certainly not reaching everybody. I agree. I don't think the legislation would allow. Look, it's a semantic point, but it's not one I want to trip up something post a meeting of this length.
Yeah, the online will go out. Chair, I understand the councillor's point. I believe because obviously we'll be putting it in the council chambers on the website, in the library, and it will be on the online version on the 16th, that as long as it appears on the 18th, then that would be fine, because you have to put one notice in within that 14-day period. obviously that will be at the beginning and it will be on the online. I don't believe it would be problematic to push it back 2 days. I believe that if we do receive comments, I would have enough time to produce the report for the second committee. So we could, with Chair's consent, change that to the 3rd, and then belt and braces.
I absolutely get your point, Mark. I think if it was the only place it was being published, I think it would be valid to say that we need to push it back. But is everybody else content that it will be published in enough places for that to be? Everybody's making faces. Mark, come on.
If I could just point out 3.3, the wording says, and this is what made me pick it up, the law requires that any change to the table of fares must be advertised publicly in at least one local newspaper for a period of not less than 14 days. Right? It's really about the definition of what's a newspaper. I know that's been very semantic, but it really is. Do we count an online version of the Ely Standard? I wouldn't. I would count the one that I purchased on a Thursday as being the newspaper, and therefore that's going to trip me over. This is blown out of all proportion, but I wouldn't want that to be a challengeable entity that came back to haunt the council.
Sorry, Chair. I would say that because we're talking only 2 days, and I believe there will be sufficient time for me to compile any comments to get it back, should we get any. Then I think for belt and braces and safety, we change it to the 3rd. I'm quite happy to do that.
So we're amending, and thank you, Mark, for bringing that up. We're amending that in the recommendations from the 1st of October to the 3rd of October. Yeah, everybody happy with that?
Yeah.
Gareth.
I know there's an enormous amount of work here. Sorry, there's an enormous amount of work here, but one of the troubles is with this is a fairly substantial increase in the fare because it's over a 3-year period. Is it possible, is it a requirement to do it every 3 years? Do other local authorities wait 3 years to do it, or do some of them do it annually?
No, so most authorities will not initiate a fares review unless members of the public or members of the trade request it. There's a sort of I suppose, an unwritten sort of rule as such that if nobody is objecting to the current status quo, then the amount of work involved in doing the report is not justifiable at that point. Obviously, as soon as members of the public say that it's too expensive, or members of the trade say it's not expensive enough because we're not making a living out of this anymore, that's when it normally gets triggered. Now, this council does have, and it made this recommendation back in, I think it was 2022, actually. Yeah, it was 2022, was that the fares should be reviewed every 2 years. Now, that would have been obviously around Christmas 2024. And obviously we're now here a few months beyond that. That is effectively just down to resources. As all members are aware, there's been quite substantial change within the licensing section over the last 8-9 months, and so this review is slightly later than the 2 years. So yes, at the moment, East Cambridgeshire District Council has an undertaking with the trade to review every 2 years, and this is just slightly delayed due to purely just to resources and being able to actually get it sorted.
And does this sort of thing apply to the other local authorities in our area?
The table of fares applies to all who have got taxis or hackney carriages. There isn't a requirement to set fares. I believe there's one authority in England that doesn't actually have a table of fares set. So if you go to that area, you would have to always pre-negotiate when you got into a taxi on the rank. But the vast majority do set a tariff of fares and run through exactly the same process as we have. But some don't do it maybe for 5 or 6 years. There's no set requirement like with the Licensing Act policy where you have to do it at least every 5 years. We have personally set one here at being every 2 years, and unfortunately this was just slightly delayed. Like I started this in June rather than Christmas, just purely because not enough hours in the day.
Any further questions for Stuart?
Keith.
Just a question about the next review then. Will that go back to the 2-year period, or are we going to bring that forward 6 months, or what?
Councillor, it will be my intention to start work so that it can be reviewed on the 2-year point. But obviously, if factors take over, you know, there's other issues which present themselves, then obviously it can come back to a committee before then. But yeah, absolutely, a 2-year deadline will still be in force.
Thank you, Stuart. Any further questions for Stuart before we move into debate? In which case, then, who wants to start? You look, Martin. So, who's going to start? Oh, well done, John. Go on.
All right, notwithstanding my comments about the increase, I think we ought to accept this report, and it makes up for the lack of earnings over a number of years. So I'd like to propose that we accept this.
Thank you, John. I've got Mark and then Christine.
Thank you, Chair. I think I said earlier, I think this is an excellent report. I think we've almost Spanish Inquisitioned it and gone through it to the officers' credit in being able to answer all the points very clearly. We have a group of community that are providing a service. They've come to us and requested this, as I understand it, which is their right to do so. We've looked at it, and I think what's proposed is a fair on the whole. There are points I'd like to see adjusted, but on the whole, I think it's a fair thing, and I would be very happy to second the proposal.
Oh, Christine.
Yeah, couple of, before we go into the talking about the recommendation, a couple of other points I want to make. So we had the earlier question about EVs. I think, so I understand the point, we don't have any at the moment. I do think it would be worth trying to at least now establishing a baseline, because I suspect that position may well have changed in 3 years' time. And some of those things, for example, brakes and servicing costs are much lower on EVs, but capital costs traditionally have been higher. Actually, running costs from a fuel perspective. So I do quite a bit of travel to it, and I use a service that's registered in South Cambs. So I have lots of discussions about licensing with the driver who runs 3 EVs, and actually his running costs are, because the electricity costs are much lower than petrol and diesel. So it is quite a different environment. So I think it's worth preparing for that. As I said earlier, when I first looked at the report, the 20% figure looked very high. But then you look back at, particularly in that period in 2022 and 2023, when inflation was very high, you can see why we have that cost. And also, aware, so that as has already been said, the trade's asked for this review. I do think more and more people are using private hire. I can't remember the last time I used a Hackney Carriage service, because it is so easy to. I think last time I used private hire was a couple of weeks ago, and I was on a train back from London, and I could just on an app quickly order a service. So I think there is a change there, but I think there's still a need to make sure that we retain that Hackney Carriage service, because not everyone is familiar with booking online, and sometimes there just isn't. You just want to be able to take a taxi there and then. So on balance, I think it is a well-researched report, and I'm also happy to support the proposal that we go ahead with the fee table that's laid out.
Thank you, Mark. Any other comments? In which case, then I'll move to the vote. We've got Councillor Trapp proposing and Councillor Goldsack seconding. Can I have a show of hands?
It's 11 in favour.
Sorry. And we now move on to the senior officers' update.
You'll be pleased to know that there isn't really an update this time round, with various levels of work coming into the department. All I can say to councillors is that the team that have come in are doing fantastic work. That we should all be proud of the licensing authority that we have here. And I will bring a fuller report next time.
I am aware of the spectacular work that went on in the last week of August, first week of September, in order to be able to meet the special educational need vehicles for the start of the term. Am I right in thinking, Stuart, that we're not necessarily going to have anything on the 8th of October? There won't be time to bring the comments back. We're going to bring that back to November.
No, exactly. So don't believe there's going to be any need for anything on Wednesday the 8th. The November meeting will be any consultation responses from obviously the taxi fares, and also the fees review, the annual fees review that we do.
Perfect. So bring sandwiches for that day then, and you can take October the 8th. Christine.
A couple of typos on the forward agenda plan. March 2025 on that one. And
yes.
There's a 2 missing on May.
The 6th, well spotted. You can cross out October, thank you, Christine. I'll cross out October the 8th then in that case, and we will meet again then on Wednesday the 19th of October.
November.
November, I beg your pardon, what did I say? October, oh for goodness sake, I'm thinking about my birthday. Right, okay, at now 3 minutes to 12, I will bring this meeting to a close. For the lucky people staying on for the 2 subcommittees, this is a good time to grab a comfort break.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to this licensing non-statutory subcommittee meeting. I'll first ask Patrick to go through the fire drill because of members of the public here, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, if the fire alarm does sound, please leave by the nearest available exit, which is here or behind the chair and over there. Please do not use the lift to vacate the building, and the assembly point is the car park in front of the building. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Are there any declarations of interest? Okay then, we'll move on then to the item in place. The application to consent to trade a location defined as a consent street in accordance with Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982. Could Lynn like to bring?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it is to consider an application to trade from a location defined as a consent street within the East Cambridgeshire district boundary. And members are asked to consider the report and determine to grant the application as applied for or grant the application with any variation deemed reasonably necessary subject to the Council's approved standard conditions and any other specific conditions or restrictions the committee here would deem reasonable and appropriate, or you can refuse the application. In the background, it was a new application has been received from Leah Frankham of 42 Streatham Road, Wilburton, and it is to sell flowers from her store, which is called the Darling Buds of Wilburton, which is permanently located on the right-hand side of the front garden of 42 Streatham Road. And the times are listed below as Monday to Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1800 hours. And the full application form and location photo are at Appendix 6. Are at Appendix 1. In accordance with the Council's policy, the following organisations were consulted, which are bullet pointed below. And during the consultation period, officers received a total of 4 valid objections from residents living within 100 metres of the trading location, but no objections were received from the statutory consultees. In addition to the objections mentioned in paragraph 4.4, officers received 3 objections from persons not living within the consultation boundary, and these have not been validated for the purposes of the report. Those opposing the application cited that the location was too close, and I do apologise, it was Millfield Lane residents' properties and their vehicle access. They raised public safety issues regarding vehicle movement and parking. They suggested also that the trading store might be relocated to the left-hand side of the premises, adjacent to the premises driveway, to allow customers to park there. In response to the objections raised, the applicant has suggested that the bushes in Millfield Lane, next to the right-hand side of the premises, might be removed to create a parking bay for people stopping temporarily to buy flowers from the stall, which is by means of an honesty box. And from what I understand from Leah, is that they don't come to her front door, that they just put the money in. So it's a very, to make it a quicker movement. And the details of the measurements and photos, etc., are at Appendix 3 of the report. The arguments and conclusions in considering applications for the grant of street trading consent, as well as the individual merits of the application, street trading policy provides the council that the council may have regard to the number, nature and type of traders already trading within the consent area, which obviously there is nobody else trading in flowers in that area. And they have regards to public safety, public order, the avoidance of public nuisance, highway issues and compliance with legal requirements. And at 4.2, the Council's street trading policy states that the Council will normally grant a street trading consent unless it's in its opinion it has a significant effect on road safety would arise from the siting of the trading activity, where there are concerns over the recorded level of personal injury accidents in the locality where the street trading occurs. There would be significant loss of amenity caused by traffic noise, rubbish, or potential for harbourage of vermin, etc. There is already adequate provision in the immediate vicinity of the site for the to be used for the street trading purposes, and that there is conflict with traffic orders. The site or pitch obstructs either pedestrians or vehicle access or traffic flows, or places pedestrians in danger where in the use for street trading purposes, or the traffic unit, a trading unit obstructs the safe passage of users of the footway or carriageway, or the trading unit is not considered to be suitable in style or keeping with the location requested. The pitch interferes with sight lines for any road users, such as road junctions or pedestrian crossing facilities, or the site does not allow the consent holder, staff and customers to park in a safe manner. Equally, the street trading activity is carried out after dusk and the site is not adequately lit. And in the case of renewal application, which this isn't, previous years' fees have not been settled, etc. The licensing committee can only consider comments regarding the flower stall element of the objections raised when making their decision. Parking for activities carried on inside the premises is a planning matter, and licensing does not cover this sort of trading from the premises. With regards to parking and nuisance, generally these issues would be covered by condition 20 of the standard street trading conditions, which are attached to the report, and should consent be granted, if following grant trading activity causes issues, the street trading conditions will become enforceable and the street trading consent can be withdrawn. And the street trading policy allows members and officers to depart from the policy where there are clear and compelling reasons to do so. Additional implications or assessment, there is a table which lists the financial implications, legal implications, human resources, equality, carbon impact, and data protection impact assessment. Legal implications, the Local Government Miscellaneous Provisions Act 1982 contains adopted provisions enabling local councils to control street trading, and that is by designating streets as licensed streets, consent streets, or prohibited streets. And street trading is only permitted in a licence or a consent street if the council has given permission by way of a licence or a consent. Permission cannot be given to trade on prohibited streets, and street trading is not controlled in streets that have not been designated by the council. But obviously, the street that we are talking about has been designated as a consent street. And the council reviewed its street trading resolutions in 2015, and following a consultation exercise, all streets, as defined in the 1982 Act, were designated as consent streets with the exception of the A roads, A10, 11 and A14 trunk roads, and they were designated as prohibited streets. If applications that do not attract objections can be dealt with via delegated powers to officers. However, if an objection is received, the application must be determined by members, and in this case, objections were received. In April 2018, minor amendments were made to the street trading policy to enabling the licensing subcommittee or the main licensing committee to determine such applications. These amendments came into effect on the 11th of April 2018. And Schedule 4 of the paragraph paragraph 7.2 of the 1982 Act provides that a council may grant a consent if they think fit, subject to observing the mandatory grounds for refusal at subparagraph 7.3. No mandatory grounds or refusal are applicable to this application. The council is not under any duty to grant a street trading consent and need not specify any of the statutory grounds for refusal. Therefore, the matter is to grant or refuse an application for a street trading consent is at the total discretion of the council. However, the council must have regard to its street trading policy, which outlines the approach that it will take in determining applications of this sort, and any comments submitted in support or opposition to the granting of the application. Members will need to give full reasons for their decisions, and accordingly, the committee may grant an application as it stands, in which case it will be subject to the council's approved conditions, standard conditions of Appendix 4, or grant the application with any variation deemed reasonably necessary, subject to the council's approved standard conditions and any other specific conditions or restrictions the committee may deem reasonable and appropriate, or the committee can refuse the application. Street trading consents can be issued for a maximum of 12 months, but can be issued for shorter periods, and street trading consents can be revoked at any time. The financial implications, the cost of convening the licensing non-statutory subcommittee to determine the application is covered by the fees paid by those applying for the consent. There is no formal right of appeal. However, should the council decision be subject to a judicial review, legal fees to defend the review would be accrued. An equality impact assessment is not required, as this does not relate to a service provided by the council or a decision to change a policy, but a regulatory disciplinary matter relating to an individual. The appendices are the application and trading location photos, the consultee objections, the applicant's response to the objections, and the standard trading conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. If we go on, has anyone got any questions for the officer? Yes, Keith.
Just a matter of clarification. So, in deciding the yes or no for the licence for the street trading stall, whilst you've pointed out that planning matters are not within our purview, but we do need to consider matters relating to road safety. That's correct, yes?
Yes.
Thank you.
One of the objections has noted, and I'm fully appreciative we're not here to determine highways matters, but I think I need to ask the question to clarify my own mind. One of the objectors has noted that the status of the road in question is indeed a bridle way, and it is a bridle way according to County Council mapping, which I've just checked. A bridle way doesn't allow access for motor vehicles, and yet everybody who lives along that road drives along it to get to their properties. So I'm not clear whether it's a bridle way or not. If it's a bridle way, then it is being technically abused not only by people stopping to buy flowers at the stand, but by everybody who lives along the lane. And I would appreciate some clarification of that, because many of the objections, well, I'll say many out of 4, the objections to the application stem largely from the effect on parking and whether there should be vehicles on the bridle way, and therefore the status of it as a bridle way and the right to put a vehicle on the bridle way, whether to drive along it or park on it, seems to me to be fairly integral to an assessment of whether or not the objections are valid.
the stall itself is not situated on the bridle. The stall is situated on Streatham Road. Now, so it's really the people buying the flowers that they're turning round or whatever, and I'm not too sure that we can get involved in saying if the stall's on the bridleway, I could understand that, but what they're saying is that people are stopping and parking on the bridleway, on what they say is a bridleway.
That I understand. However, we are here to determine whether or not we should pay heed to the objections, are we not, in considering the application? And if the objections hinge on the stall attracting vehicles to park on a bridleway, then I think we need to know whether those are valid objections given the status and use of the road. And I'm not clear whether we are looking at illegal use of the bridleway for people stopping to buy the flowers, or whether their activity in parking there is simply a nuisance.
Unfortunately, the officer can't answer that as such because it's a highways thing and what happens there locally. Should there be vehicle prohibited signs actually put up to do that, is what I would say, by the highways.
Do you mean parking prohibited in that spot? Because my argument is that people drive down that road all the time. I drive down that road because I didn't know it was a bridleway. I assume I should stop and do the whole, do my steps all the way down there. But it's not clear to me that and it may not be clear to other people that it's a bridleway, if indeed it is a bridleway, which I believe it to be.
I have a suspicion that this is an out-of-date bridleway. I think it used to be a bridleway, probably 20, 30 years ago before the houses were built, and probably should have been redesignated by County Highways, but it seems to have slipped through the net. Maybe it's something that a county councillor could bring to their attention and see if they can redesignate the road, or anybody living on that road can no longer drive their cars down it.
I will approach the county councillor concerned to ask that question. I don't know whether there was any, whether this was raised at planning stage for the properties that have been newly built down there, but I don't know whether our legal officer has any awareness of this that can know.
Thank you, Lorna. John?
I had more or less the same comment to make, because one noticed in the objections letters there was reference to whatever it is, farm machinery going down the bridleway, which I thought was actually illegal. It was a byway which seems to have a dual use.
I have to say, most of the bridleways I've ridden my horses on in years gone by tend not to have tarmac on them. I bet the waste vehicles go down there to collect them, so it can't be a bridleway. I think it's just it's not been redesignated by highways for whatever reason. It's my personal opinion. Sorry, Chair.
Thank you. Keith?
Well, there is a map of all bridleways in the Cambridgeshire area that's available online, and surely from that, if you have that up and it says that as of today it is a registered bridleway, that will tell you whether non-motorised users are allowed on it, or whether, because it actually, and because I've had this, I've dealt with matters of a similar nature previously as a district councillor, perhaps we could have the information as to what's actually written on the county website.
The mapping information is that that particular bridleway is a bridleway, and it's reference 261/11, and it's path number 11 in Wilburton, which is parish 261, hence the reference number. And it's shown in green as a bridleway. on the map of public rights of way and access. It's continuously updated, yes.
And
It's not completely error-free, but it is by far the most reliable and full source of mapping that there is.
but in the matter of this licensing application, I don't believe that the stall is positioned in that bridleway. And as we can't deal with parking because that's a planning matter, appreciate we need to consider road safety, etc., etc. I wanted to check from the photograph, it actually looked, or it appeared as if the stall was at the front of the property that's owned by the flower business. And I just wanted to check whether the actual stall is being positioned on the property owner's private land or whether it ventures itself out onto the public highway. Do we know that?
The applicant is here, so they can, my understanding in speaking to them that it is on their property.
Okay, so what we're being told is that our understanding is that the stall is actually on their private property. Do they still need an application for a stall on their private property?
They do.
Street trading.
Street trading defined as a street as any area where the public can don't have to pay to enter in order to obtain and purchase goods that are put out for sale, including those which are contiguous to the property. So if it's immediately to the front of the property, or whether it's in the on a shopping precinct, wherever it may be, we've designated everywhere to be consent streets, and the definition of a street is incredibly wide under this piece of legislation.
Just another one for legal then. Looking at these photographs, there are no road signs saying that they are prohibited to vehicles, which it should do, because it's wide enough for vehicles to go up and down and pass each other. So should there not be signage there to say that vehicles are not allowed up that road?
I think that's a matter for the county council. That's not a matter within our purview. I mean, normally bridleways and byways, as Julie has alluded to, usually they're quite clear that you can't put motorised vehicles on them.
Gareth.
I know that we're not responsible for the planning side of things, but do we know if this particular stall has planning permission to be there? Because it would require planning permission, wouldn't it?
I have already discussed this with planning, and it has been considered that planning condition is not relevant in this situation, and it would come under street trading. The authority would be street trading and not planning.
So they're saying that no planning permission is required, is that right?
That the planning officers have reviewed the stall, and they said that there is no planning issues, no planning consent required.
That, I suspect, is correct for the actual stall itself, but obviously as part of the application there is an indication about a removal of bushes to enable it to become a parking space, and I believe that is the aspect that might need the planning approval, and I think that was referred to in the officer's report, that any removal of bushes to turn it into a parking space could require a planning application, and so therefore, if that is correct, do we know whether or not, and have we asked whether an application has been made in respect of changing that area into a parking space?
I'm sorry. The bushes are positioned, I don't think the bushes are on their property. The bushes are next to their property, on the bridleway. So I don't think that that would be a planning issue, but I may be wrong. I would think that that would be an issue regarding highways. So
Can we ask the applicant? Not yet. Okay. So that's
So-
why I haven't asked the applicant.
so yeah, so I you know, that's not, you know, this is a suggestion by the applicant, and if obviously the you know, the applicant you know, if it was something that the committee thought was possible, then the applicant would have to take those steps to go and do that.
Just a reminder, this is questions to the officers, to everyone. Is there any more? Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Can one be clear, I've looked at the photographs, can one be clear that there are no restrictions on parking opposite this property at the moment on the A11 to 23?
There's no yellow lines.
So there's no restrictions on
It's to
parking?
the officers, Gareth, not
This
you.
is to the officer. Am I just clear about that?
Yeah, there are no restrictions. There are no signs and no restrictions as to parking.
Thank you very much.
Before we go to, I've got one for you. Is this retrospective? Because obviously in the photographs we can see a stall there.
It is retrospective, yes. The stall has been trading for some time. It has come to our notice, and obviously, you know, we are obliged to take, you know, to take action on this. And we've been trying to work with both the objectors and the applicant to try and get it so that a strict trading consent can be considered. There is no planning issues, that's what we have been advised. So, you know, it's here for determination.
Keith.
I noticed that there appears to be a board outside, advertising board, what have you. Presumably that's part of the licensing application as well, or does that need any form of planning application to be on the public highway?
I'll answer this one, Councillor. A-frames are usually dealt with by the Highways Authority, and I do know that A-frames in particular were an issue in Ely City Centre, and they went around, but no sooner do they take action, they pop up again. But it isn't specifically an issue for licensing. Obviously, if consent to trade is given, then clearly there'd be an argument that the A-frame will be present because of that flower stall being present, and if consent's not given, then obviously the flower stall can't be present. But then potentially the household owner could keep the A-frame there and advertise the other part of the business, and it would be something for planning and highways to deal with, not licensing.
Anyone else? No? Okay, then I'll call on the applicant to put that case forward. You have 5 minutes.
Hi, yeah, my name's Peter Frankham, Leah's partner. So obviously we put in an application for the street trading licence, as you're fully aware. Obviously we've looked at some of the comments that have come in after we've submitted the photographs and our sort of suggestion of putting in a parking bay. So we've looked at some of the comments from the residents, and obviously their concern is there's a safety issue at the top of the lane, which to me is a little bit questionable because it's quite a wide lane and people can park responsibly down the lane when they pull in, you know, but we've obviously offered to create a parking area. Obviously one of the councillors did suggest that do we need planning for that, just to clear that is on our title deeds that we are responsible to maintain those bushes. So the removal of those bushes is probably something that we can do within our title deeds, firstly. Secondly, creating a parking bay there, or creating a pull-in area, we widen it and obviously give it some safe parking, and we can put a directional sign parking for flower stall there, which we're quite happy to do. So that, I think that clears it up. With regards to what the councillor was saying about the being a byway, I think we've checked it is listed as a bridleway. Whether it needs to be reclassified just going forward, just as a matter of conversation, to a boat or a UC, which is a unclassified road, I think class 3, so probably something that may need looking into in the future. But yeah, there is substantial, not a lot of traffic that goes up. There's 13 residents living down the lane. Some of the people have put in that there's 150 to 200 vehicles a day. I can sit in my garden, which we spend a lot of time in the garden, and probably 3 or 4 vehicles an hour at the most. You might see the odd tractor go up and down there, so it's not heavily used. To be honest with you, but and there is no restriction outside the property along the main road there, although it's a 30-mile-an-hour limit. It's part of the trunk road that comes into Wilburton. You know, you can go 300 or 400 yards down the road. There's people parked there as you come further into the village, as you can appreciate, outside the properties. We don't really want to start encouraging people to park along there. But I don't, you know, for safety reasons. So we're happy to sort of look at people parking down the lane and in a safe manner by putting that sort of parking bay in. It's something we can look at doing. There is space on our driveway to pull at least 1 or 2 cars in, which is further along on the other side of the property. A couple of residents have suggested that we move the stall to that side. It's something that we did consider, we could consider, but the other thing, my fear is people probably will still park in the lane and walk across anyway. So moving it from one end to another isn't. They just want the problem moved away from the top of the lane, but I don't think you're going to achieve anything by doing that. I think long term we've got to, be responsible and look at a simple solution. We've got another entrance that it's about 30 metres from the lane. There's a set of double black gates, which I've got some photographs here. We didn't submit anything for that. This is about 4 metres wide, which we can create another parking area, which I'm going to do anyway, because it's started to get a bit overgrown through the summer. So clear it, and then there's a sort of entrance to the driveway. So there's already a bit of a parking bay, which is about 30 metres further down. But we can encourage people, obviously, through directional signs to park there anyway, because there's a bit of a parking bay that's been created there anyway. So obviously that's if people are allowed to drive down the lane in the first place. So I don't know what else to say, really. That's basically, we did have the planning officers came out at great length, look at the business. They looked at some of the way the nature of the business is operated. As I say, Leah does the flowers from home, and really it's just weddings and stuff like that, and puts a few flowers out, a few little plants out, and it's normally stuff that's left over from previous weddings or funerals, so it's not an ongoing massive business where people are constantly coming to and from. It's more of a sort of honesty box type of thing that she enjoys doing and doing for the community and herself. So they come out and they're quite happy that it's doesn't require planning. The size of the unit is more for waterproofing than actually filling it up with stock and selling it. So as I say, from a planning point of view, they were more than happy that it doesn't require any further planning, and obviously turned it over to yourselves for appropriate licensing, which obviously we're here today for. So I don't think there's anything else. If anyone's got any further questions they want to throw at us, if that's possible.
Thank you for that. You've finished that. Does anyone have a question for the applicant? John?
I have 2 questions. One is, at the moment, how many sort of vehicles do you think stop there, and per day, shall we say, or every hour, every minute, or I mean, can we have is there a quantity?
I mean, to be honest with you, Leah, she'll correct me if I'm wrong, but probably makes up sort of 4 or 5 little bouquets, puts them out. How many people stop on a Monday to Wednesday and buy flowers? It's something you do on a Friday, Saturday, possibly, over the weekend. She might sell half a dozen or a dozen. They might have 2 or 4 visitors a day. Obviously, their peak times at Mother's Day and Christmas is when there's something going on that will increase. And I think one thing that was identified by the planning officer, I think the original complaint did come in to the planning department, which was sometime back in March. I think it was a Monday or Tuesday after the Mother's Day, which obviously there was a few people stopping and stuff like that, picking flowers up, as you can appreciate, one day a year, So from a normal point of view, there's probably two or three vehicles at the most. I wouldn't even say a day, probably over weekends there's a couple of vehicles. All the delivery, Leah does deliveries for the flowers, all delivered for funerals and weddings. Nobody picks up funeral flowers, all delivered to a funeral home. And to be honest with you, if you get a couple of orders a month, you know, it's not something that's a massive business. If it was, we'd be probably sitting in a shop somewhere.
Following on from that, when all the flowers have been sold, do you take down the sign, so stop people sort of stopping on the off chance?
Yeah, I mean, people can see it from the roadside. They obviously can see, you know, whether there's anything out there. We was away on holiday for sort of 2 to 3 weeks, come back about 10 days, 2 weeks ago. So there's absolutely nothing out there, and there was, you know, obviously no one stopped, no one did anything because obviously there was no stop, nothing there. So people, I think, if there's something there, they'll stop and look. There is an A-board that's there that is just saying stop here for fresh flowers, and it also says at the bottom about the parking in the lane. Please park, you know, responsibly when stopping for flowers. So we put that out. We can sort of look at elaborating a bit more on that. You know,
so at present, do they stop on the A1123?
Not generally. You do get people that do stop along there. I mean, you know, there is no stopping restrictions or anything stopping there. You know, there's the odd person. There was a couple of pictures that were put in there. You know, anybody can take a picture of someone parked across the top of the lane. People do stop there all the time, not necessarily going to a flower stall, but it is quite a wide entrance to stop in. You know, if you're just in your sat-nav, you want to make a phone call and do things. You know, there's obviously construction vehicles that always seem to be there because I've been doing a lot of Angler waterworks, and you know, around that area over the last few months. But yeah, I mean, there's plenty of places to stop along there in a safe manner. We're all responsible drivers, you know.
Okay. Final question then. There's photographs showing distances on either side of this bridle way, on the entrance to the bridle way, where do I get the impression that you want to do it as you enter the bridle way on the right-hand side, i.e. adjacent to your property? Or is it, because you've also included photographs of the land associated with, or land beside number 1 Millfield Lane. So which of these
yeah,
is
the part that we're looking at doing is clearing the trees, which is on our side. I mean, the land opposite Millfield Lane is obviously, for reference, it's a similar sort of size. It's about 10 metres long and about 2.6 metres wide, but that's just a grassed area. So obviously that just shows, it'll be a mirror image of that clearing, if that makes sense. It's going to provide a better line of sight when you're driving out of the lane anyway, because the trees and bushes have got quite tall on that corner. And to be honest with you, the other thing, obviously, when we did purchase the property, we purchased it off the previous owner, who sort of gardened off a bit of the land, and he's kept sort of 4.5 acres. So there was one entrance off Millfield Lane that's got planning for, and then we've obviously got the planning for the property on Streatham Road. But I mean, if any visitors that come to our property, they generally do park down the lane anyway, which can be a little bit of a problem to some of the neighbours as well that we've had in the past. So creating some sort of parking bay or an area that's safe to stop there is going to be helpful to visitors as much as people visiting the flower stall. So.
Thank you very much for your answers.
Thanks.
Gareth.
Thank you. The bushes that we were discussing, are they growing on your land or are they growing on the highway?
They're growing on our land. If I look at the title deeds, they're on our land, and we are responsible for cutting the bushes. So our land finishes about where the bush line is. So we are responsible for that whole line of bushes going down Millfield Lane and maintaining them. And there is a post that's there. Probably you might be able to see it in one of the photographs. There's a wooden sort of a post that had an old fence. So we've obviously, the boundary of the front of our property is the fence that runs along the front of the property, and we've kept the flower stall in line with that. I mean, we have erected the wooden fence to the side of the property. We've erected since we've been in there, but we brought that closer into the boundary because there was no fence there from when we moved in. Obviously, we wanted to have security and enclose a fence in our property. But the bushes form the boundary. That's what it is, and that's what it's on our title deeds as well. So
if you wanted to, you could remove the bushes yourself. Don't need permission from anybody.
no, we could move the bushes. As far as I'm concerned, it's on my title deeds. As the owner of the property, it's our responsibility to maintain the bushes. They don't belong to anybody. They don't belong to anybody within the lane. There's no restrictions on them. There's no protection on them. There's nothing. So we would move the bushes. And as I say, it's a 10 metre. There's about 4 bushes there that we just take out and just put a piece of hardcore, just hardcore it across, to be honest with you.
So to pacify your neighbours, it might be easier to just take them out and put something prettier on the way.
Yes, I mean, when we moved in 3 years ago, the farmer used to come along and cut them for £10, but something's gone on down the lane and he's no longer willing to do that. So as you can see from the pictures to the right-hand side, all the bushes are quite severely overgrown all the way down the lane, as where they used to get cut by the farmer. But as I say, I think I don't get in with lane politics. I can't do it. So,
Thank you. Julia?
So I understand this has all been generated by a complaint that went into planning in March. How long had you had the flower stall there prior to that occasion?
Probably had it, it's probably 18 months, 2 years at the time of the complaint went in. To be honest with you, I mean, the person that has complained lives directly opposite, and she has problem backing into a driveway. She's an elderly lady, and there's notes left on cars and stuff like that, and we've had an ongoing problem, as she highlighted in her letter, just turning around and saying that she's been accused of being unreasonable, this, that, and the other, which we've had a few heated conversations with her, and it's when she's we got people visiting us, and she's coming out telling them to move and not have the car parked there, you can't park it there, etc., etc. So, yeah, I mean, it's causing a bit of a problem anyway, and I don't really know. I think putting that parking bay in there is going to just give us a bit more width. If people are there, then they're actually off the illegal road or bridleway, whatever you want to call it. So they're not actually sitting on that, and they're off of that and moved down the lane a bit. But as I say, there is another entrance that I'm prepared to do. It's already got a bit of a cut in. It just needs clearing and tidying up a bit and maintaining and doing properly, which is about 30 metres down. I have got some pictures of that here with a couple, if you want to have a quick look at that. All right, that's fine.
Keith, when making this application, have you received a copy of the standard conditions applicable to street trading consents? When making this application, have you received a copy of the standard conditions applicable to street trading consents?
Yes, we did, yeah.
So you've got that. So I'm looking at item 9. Any stall, vehicle, van, barrow or cart authorised by the council must be equipped with safe and adequate lighting for operation during the hours of darkness. Does that apply here? Is there lighting?
We've got lighting, there's power in it, and we've got PS, as you walk up, it lights the stall.
Motion sensor.
Yeah, motion sensor. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay.
Yeah.
And item 3, the consent holder or the person nominated by the consent holder shall attend in person at the consent position, i.e. the stall, for not less than 75% of the time on any day which trading is carried out. Now, you've applied 7 days a week from 10 a.m. till 6 p.m.
Yeah.
So you're going to have somebody there for 75% of the hours between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. 7 days a week in order to comply with that condition. Is that correct?
Well, we live in the property. We won't
at the stall.
Well, we won't be actually at the stall. It's not manned. It's not a manned
So you
stall.
could not meet that requirement.
So just for point of clarification, the purpose of that condition is for traders who are trading, for instance, in a lay-by where they're taking that lay-by, and the idea is that so other people, they don't essentially take the consent away from other people and then not actually attend this location. So the fact that the stall is going to be present at the property that we're looking to give consent to, and the stall will be there 100% of the time, it doesn't have to be manned 100% of the time. It just has to be present at the property. And so because it's an immovable object that they have, as opposed to a trading wagon that's moving from X to Z. So for instance, if this was a movable van that was pulled up and parked, it would have to be there at least 75% of the time. But obviously it's a static site, it's there, and it by default has to be there 100% of the time, but it doesn't have to be manned 100% of the time. That's how we would interpret, from a licensing point of view, that particular requirement.
So if I may just check, so that particular section of the consent would be removed as a condition, is that correct?
Well, it wouldn't be removed as such, because these are just standard conditions within the policy that are applied to all, but it wouldn't be enforceable because they are complying with it by having the stall present at the location, which is going to be street trading at least 75% of the time, because it's static and it's always there. There's not a requirement, and from our point of view, we wouldn't look to enforce that condition, but it would be within the standard. It would be within the standard conditions, because the standard conditions are applied to all street licence consent holders.
It's just that obviously this talks about the consent holder, i.e. that's a person, not the stall itself. So that's what was guiding me.
Sorry, Chair. Could we vary that condition in this consent?
We can certainly, with these consents, we can issue with a varied condition. What I would also suggest is that at a future licensing committee that we look to obviously amend them within the policy to make it clearer moving forward. But certainly in this context, yes, we can.
Stuart, just a quick one before we go on. Does that also, with the public liability insurance as well, is that? Because on the form it wasn't ticked.
So the public liability insurance, we would expect a consent holder to have that if people are coming onto their property, but I would imagine the applicant has got some sort of insurance in place, because obviously if somebody was to trip or fall, then a claim could be coming their way. So yes, it would be something they'd need.
Can we ask, do you want to ask the applicant that?
Lorna? I've got a question about the alternative locations suggested by the objectors to the scheme, some of whom have suggested that they're not objecting to the stall in principle, but they would prefer that it traded from the other side of the other end of the building so that it didn't impinge on Millfield Lane. I was wondering whether the applicants could comment on whether they had considered that, and if that was impractical, what their reasons for coming to that conclusion might be.
If I can just give you, I did print out pictures. I've got 3 sort of copies here. If we can share them around, is that okay, or is that not okay to have a quick look?
Yep.
They are, yeah, these are extra ones. They are of the additional. Just got to remember what they are. There's 3 copies there if you want to just.
While this is going on, you do have liability insurance?
Yes, there's liability insurance. It's on the pack that I printed out, so I presume you oh, didn't I? Oh, okay. So it's this one. Yeah, if you can look at the photographs there, as you can see, there's a photograph of the front of the property. To the left-hand side, circled in red, is the existing position of the flower stall, which runs along within our boundary of the boundary fence at the front of the property. To the right-hand side, there's another red circle that there's a small fence area, measures about the same sort of size as the other area, which we could just move the fence back or erect something there. But in doing that, my concern is people are probably going to still stop in the lane and walk along anyway. And what I'm trying to avoid is people then pulling in the top of my driveway or using the driveway, which I've got no no problem with, but not stopping correctly in the driveway and just sort of pulling up and then causing a bit further traffic situation along a main road, a trunk road, which, I'm trying to avoid, if that makes sense. So it is an option, happy to move it if we need to move it to get the consent for the licence. But to me, I think the position of where it is now and using the lane that isn't, just putting something in that's going to be a bit more safer with a parking bay, so they're actually off the main trunk road, people can turn around safely and move in and out. That's really what my thought process was with it. So,
anyone else? No. Thank you very much for all your comments.
Any further questions for the officer?
Any further questions for the officers?
Any further
Go.
questions?
Okay, Lorna.
I'm just, while this conversation has been going on, I have just, in the absence of any other information about the bridleway status, just Googled the last couple of planning applications along Millfield Lane in Wilburton. The most recent one is a refused application for an alteration to, in fact, the erection of an outbuilding. And the planning officer in their report in May this year has stated that this is on a bridle way. He or she, I think, has listed it as a constraint, but not given any further information. 2021, however, the definitive maps team from the County Council has responded because it was there were a lot more papers on that. And Tom Rushela from the team said in December 2021 that he confirmed that this is a bridleway and has said that the public do not have the general right to drive on the bridleway. The definitive map team did not oppose that proposal, which was to put 4 dwellings at land south of 5 Millfield Lane, and that was an application that was granted. So the definitive mapping team did not object to the proposal, despite the fact that it was on a bridleway and would generate traffic. However, there were a number of conditions attached to their comments on that. That it must not be, the public bridleway must not be used to access the development site unless the applicant is sure they have lawful authority to do so. And it is an offence to drive on a public bridleway without lawful authority. The bridleway must remain open and unobstructed at all times. And that the County Council doesn't own the bridleway, but the highways' rights over the bridleways are vested in the County Council as the Highways Authority, and the County Council does not know who the owner of the subsoil is. There is no legally defined or recorded width for the bridleway, and they're not able to advise what it would be, and as the dimensions are not known, they cannot guarantee that the applicant would be able to improve the bridleway to secure an adoptable standard that might be required by the local planning authority. So the applicant in that case would proceed with any development that might affect the highway at their own risk. So there is a lot of uncertainty about the status of this, but one thing that does seem to be the case is that that were this to go to a planning application, it seems to me that the definitive mapping team would be insisting that it remain open and unobstructed, and we'd have to determine, I think, they would have to determine what they mean by open and unobstructed, and we might want to think about that in coming to our own conclusion on this. But that it is not clear to me that there is an objection in principle from the definitive mapping team ever to have vehicles driving along this. It's just that people are doing it to some extent at their own risk. So it's all rather confusing, but I think we can answer definitively that it is a bridle way. It's just a question of what that means in practice for this application. I think.
Yeah, I mean, we can move this to sort of the closed session, but I think that the mapping team need to have another look at it.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I'm very glad you put your foot down there, you know, because otherwise you will get a takeover. This is actually a question to the officer. I don't know that part of the district. So what is the road usage along the A1123? Is it very heavily dense?
Yes, very heavy indeed. I live on it.
You live on it?
Yes.
So you got an interest in that. All right, but there's still
And it is the one of the part of the advisory freight route map as well.
Ah, that's before. Wasn't it something about it changing to be a B road or something? Oh, I love that. But there's still no restriction on parking along that road. Okay, thank you very much.
There are no restrictions on that road for parking.
Okay, thank you. Does the applicant want to say anything else before we go into closed session?
Yeah, just obviously thanking councillors for their time on this matter, and also just referencing what Lorna said about the bridleway. Yeah, I mean, it has been an unclear situation for the whole time we've lived there, through the residents who either living there for 40 or 50 years. They've obviously granted planning applications for building properties down that lane. Obviously, when they're granting planning applications, they're fully aware that traffic's going up and down that lane. So it probably is just needs reclassifying somewhere, either, as I said, as a use unclassified road, or as a byway open to all traffic. So at the moment, yes, it is a byway, and it's what it says on the ordnance survey maps and on the council websites. But obviously, it's a matter that. And then obviously. The stall in our property is facing Streatham Road. It's only because people are pulling into that lane that's causing the problem. You know, our trading faces out and our property is Streatham Road. We're not Millfield Lane. So just to clarify that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your time. We will be going into a closed session now to debate whether we grant or not grant the application. You can wait for the answer if you like, or leave a contact number and someone will contact you and give you the answer.